This whole thing's gonna be a goddamn fiasco, and I'm gonna enjoy every second of it.
No, it's gonna go fine.
No, it isn't.
The Last of Us Season 2 was not doomed from the start. To call the video game controversial would be an understatement, much of the controversy being well-deserved and some of it less so. But Season 1 of the HBO TV show demonstrated that the showrunners, Neil Druckmann and Craig Mazin, are willing to make changes to the story in adapting the video game. Season 1 was good, although not great, and many of the new changes made the story worse, and so The Last of Us game remains superior to the TV show, despite the show probably being the best adaptation of a video game that has been made. Arcane Season 1 doesn't count because I barely consider that an adaptation. This means Season 2 had promise, despite the shakiness of the source material in terms of its narrative content, character arcs, and story structure, because the showrunners had already displayed a willingness to try to improve upon the source material.
I knew we would change certain things. I really kind of relied on Craig in those instances to just say, what's best for the show? Like really kind of let's hold each other accountable to do what's best for the show. Just because something was done in the game and it was successful in the game doesn't mean it's the best choice for the show.
But where Season 1 was a mostly tight story about the emotional bond between Joel and Ellie, Season 2 is a slog, an uneventful, meandering, unbelievable tale that still places its characters front and center, but the characters themselves are unrelentingly vapid and empty. So, let's get started. We open with a group of brand new characters led by Abby Thunderguns. Her Thunderguns are still in their infant stage at this point because TV Abby had to be played by an actual human female and not a silverback gorilla. She stares lovingly at giraffes because her father had great affinity with zoo animals. Abby and her crew are standing over a mass grave, and we learn that these are the bodies of the Fireflies Joel killed at the end of Season 1 in order to save Ellie. Abby says that they need to find Joel, and she has an approximate description of him as well as his name, and says that she is going to kill Joel slowly. This is the first of many changes the show makes to the story itself and how the story is depicted. In the show, the audience is very aware of Abby's reason for playing golf with Joel's cranium from the opening scene. Regardless of how justified she is in her actions, this is part of a very conscious effort by the writers to make Abby as sympathetic as possible before she murders Joel. Other examples of this include Abby's crew sedating Dina instead of clobbering Tommy, as well as showing us the scene of Abby finding her father's body prior to her enacting her revenge. This is clearly an improvement over the game because the objective of both iterations of the story is for the audience to understand Abby's actions as being, at the very least, justifiable to her, which then informs the end of the story, which we will get to in Season 3 or potentially Season 4. The game has Abby show up and then murder the main character from the first game with zero build-up or any attempt at contextualizing why she might do this, and then after 12 hours or so playing as Ellie hunting down Abby, the game says, actually, let's rewind and see the whole thing from Abby's perspective. And by this point, the player will very likely have zero investment in the character of Abby, and no reason to give a modicum of shit about her reasoning. The player detests Abby from the start of the game due to the lack of context, which was presumably intentional. But the game then does an insufficient job of course-correcting in the latter half because the last thing the player is going to want to do is spend 10 hours playing as Joel's murderer. Part of the reason for this problem manifesting as it does in the game is that Druckuloid seems to be of the belief that simply playing as Abby gives the player a reason to empathize with Abby.
How we introduce her and the context we put her in this season right off the bat. It's the first new scene, really, that we see after Joel and Ellie walk towards Jackson, is something that we talked about a lot. And part of it was the way she's introduced in the game is through you playing her.
When you're playing as the character, you have this immediate empathy towards them. Like, you don't have to have as much quote-unquote writing or drama or show as much relationships. That is more of like the fuel for how the game moves forward. We don't have that, so then we have to rely on other things.
Yeah.
Revealing Abby's motive in the opening of Season 2 also means that we know who Abby is when we encounter her later in Episode 2, which definitely affects the tension. This is quite a good example of the whole Alfred Hitchcock bomb under the table thing, where Hitchcock proposes, Let us suppose that there is a bomb underneath this table between us. Nothing happens, and then all of a sudden, boom! There is an explosion. The public is surprised, but prior to this surprise, it has seen an absolutely ordinary scene of no special consequence. Now let us take a suspense situation. The bomb is underneath the table, and the public knows it. In these conditions, this same innocuous conversation becomes fascinating because the public is participating in the secret. In the game, we have absolutely no idea who Abby is, and then holy shit nuggets, she just killed Joel, what the fuck is this? This is both surprising and shocking because we have no context for what is happening or why. In the show, this is less shocking, but more suspenseful, because from the moment we get the reveal that, oh no, Joel just accidentally crossed paths with Abby Thunderguns, we know who Abby is, what she wants to do to Joel, and why, and so the show has a degree of suspense and dread that was not present in the game. We are then introduced to Ellie, who is still played by 21-year-old Bella Ramsey, and whilst Ellie is now 19 instead of 14, Bella Ramsey still looks and acts like a 14-year-old. This was not only fine, but totally appropriate for Season 1. By the end of Season 1, however, she was forced to grow up, she had lost her innocence, and she was not as naive as she once was. Cut to 5 years later, during which time Ellie has learned the truth from Joel, which I will get to later, and Ellie is continuing to behave like a child, only with an added sprinkle of self-entitled obnoxiousness. She is shown to be desperate to be an adult and not to be Joel's little kid who needs protecting. She enjoys fighting and training with the other guys, but then all sense of fun is zapped out of her when she is informed that her opponent was pulling punches. Ellie doesn't want to be treated differently. Tommy then tells Ellie that he has taken her off patrols and put her on gate watch because Joel is worried about her given the fact that she wandered off on her own and got attacked by zombies on her last patrol. Ellie, being a reckless and selfish asshat, starts complaining about how she really wants to go on patrol. She doesn't want the boring job.
I'm an adult. He can't tell me what I can and can't do.
Alrighty then.
Yes, dear, you are an adult, but you are also part of a functional society in the post-apocalypse. You have a serious responsibility to protect people who cannot protect themselves, and also Jackson is a communist utopia, which means, I'm sorry, Ellie, but like everyone else, you are going to do as you are told. Instead of saying any of that, because Tommy's personality has been replaced with a damp sock, he tells Ellie, you know, sometimes it's easier to just do what Joel says. He's pretty persistent. And in order to demonstrate to Tommy that she is an adult and deserves to be treated like one, Ellie proceeds to behave like an impetuous child.
I got bit, everybody!
Hey.
I'm immune!
Whoa. I hate you.
Thereby demonstrating that Joel and Tommy are absolutely right to be taking her off patrol. Naturally, Tommy then relents and puts Ellie back on patrol, indicating that he would rather roll over and let this arrogant brat get her own way than actually do what is best for the town he is responsible for. Ellie is an obvious risk to herself and everyone else, and Tommy should absolutely know this. And yet he doesn't, because the show doesn't. Ellie's general attitude in Season 2 is distractingly upbeat. She is miserable in the game even before Joel dies, which is far more appropriate for the character given what has happened to her. The game could accurately be described as a misery simulator, and regardless of what you think about the narrative choices in the game, it does a good job of being a misery simulator. It is appropriately miserable. Ellie in the show, however, is quirky and chipper and eager to have fun with her friends. She is remarkably well adjusted and decidedly untraumatized. The way the show treats Ellie's combat proficiency is very reminiscent of how the game approached Abby's colossal gorilla sleeves that pass for arms, in that neither are sufficiently justified or even particularly possible given the setting. Ellie has a couple of fight scenes in Season 2, and despite the choreographers and other actors doing their best to make her look convincing as a physical force to be reckoned with, this kid is like an annoying little kitten that has started nibbling your ankles. If you want Bella Ramsey to play a character that we are meant to take seriously, you don't put her in the ring with fully grown men 3 times her size. You give her other advantages, such as weapons. The show momentarily appears to acknowledge this.
I pulled it.
Why?
Because I told him to. Otherwise, he would have knocked you out.
But it then doubles down and has Ellie be like, fuck you, I'm just as tough as you, hit me properly next time. And then everyone agrees, although we unfortunately do not get to see her being slammed through the wall of the barn, having now been granted the equality she so desires.
It was important for us to show this fight because we wanted to explore how somebody who is Bella's size fights. The world is full of people that are bigger than her. And so we did a lot of research and looking around, and it seemed like jiu-jitsu was the way to go. And I watched videos of small people taking down big people, and it's kind of incredible. And they do it the way she did it there. And that's what they're training her to do.
Training in martial arts, such as jiu-jitsu, can be an equalizer that allows someone who is barely 5 feet tall, weighing in at a staggering 50 kilos or so, to survive for a period of time against a larger opponent. Episode 6 confirms that when Ellie was 16, she had 0 training, and she doesn't go on her first patrol until she is 19, which means she has been training for anywhere between 1 and 3 years. The amount of training Ellie would need to be anywhere near as good as we are expected to believe that she is would require years of extensive practice, obsession, and dedication. She would basically need to be hitting the training mats for hours every day for the last few years, whilst strictly controlling her diet and partnering up with Jesse, who is secretly an ex-MMA fighter. So, whilst this might be possible, it feels ridiculous because of what must have gone on behind the scenes in order for her to be so proficient at jiu-jitsu that she can overpower people 5 weight classes higher than she is. The writers essentially zapped her with the jiu-jitsu gun without considering what facilities or scientific backing she would need to get anywhere near this good. A somewhat comparable example is when former World's Strongest Man and current deadlift world record holder Eddie Hall, no, Thor's deadlift does not count, fought 2 MMA fighters at once, and the fight was over the moment they went anywhere near him because each of Eddie Hall's testicles weighed more than each of his opponents. They cannot beat him in a fair fight because of his obvious physical advantages. And if you transport this into the post-apocalyptic setting of The Last of Us, the way they would beat him would very obviously not be to engage in an MMA fight. The way the game handles this imbalance of power is by compensating in the form of weapons. Not just guns, but bricks, bottles, nukes, knives, sharp sticks, you get the idea. And this is appropriate because these would all be present in such a setting. What would be less present are the kinds of training facilities that would be needed to create someone good enough to make a difference. And the added bonus is that in the game, you get to see, repeatedly, how vicious someone like Ellie can be with these weapons, despite her small size, which, emotional manipulation aside, makes her seem legitimately frightening and intimidating. Far more so than, oh, don't mess with her, she's a jiu-jitsu black belt, or whatever the fuck I'm supposed to take away from this. Now, regarding Abby's thunderguns. In the game, Abby is swole to the point of looking like a female powerlifter, which is absurd for very obvious reasons. In the show, Abby Thunderguns is played by 5'1" actress Caitlin Dever, and given her physique, she likely weighs somewhere around 50 to 60 kilos or 110 to 130 pounds. For comparison, the game's version of Abby was based on Colleen Foch, who is 5'8" and weighs about 77 kilos or 170 pounds. Anyway, whilst I find it very funny that they were unable to find an actress who looks anything like Abby, this isn't necessarily a problem with the show. This version of Abby does not have an impossible physique that would require access to resources that simply would not exist in the post-apocalyptic setting of The Last of Us, which means Abby in the show is, at least physically, an improvement. However, whilst Abby's physique in the game was distractingly Hulk-esque, this was purposeful because her physicality was a part of her character. She became so obsessed with finding Joel that she hired a personal trainer, ate the personal trainer, hired another one, spent 10 hours a day pumping iron, and consumed enough calories to feed the west coast of the United States. In the show, none of this is true. Abby Thunderguns is just a normal 24-year-old.
Caitlin was involved in the world of The Last of Us going back many years when it was going to be a movie. She was in the running to play Ellie.
Abby and Ellie now have very comparable physiques, which makes any kind of conflict between them more believable. In Season 2, there are no narrative beats that require that Abby has arms that would make Arnold weep. She is not physically intimidating, nor does she have to be particularly physically proficient in order for the plot to happen. The only part of her story that is marginally less believable now that she is the size of a 10-year-old is that the rest of her crew seem afraid of her, but they reluctantly do as they are told for fear of getting on the wrong side of her. However, this is broadly a vast improvement over the game.
Abby is quite different in the game physically. She's tall, large, imposing. She works out, you could say. When we see her, she's not that.
We didn't feel like we were obliged to fully represent the same body shape that Abby has. There is a power that Abby gives you in the game as you're playing her. And as Neil said something that was so interesting to me as a game designer that I didn't really think about much as a player, I just experienced it. When you're playing somebody and you then shift over and play somebody else, they need to have different physicality, different ways to attack. And it was smart to make Abby different in that play style than, say, Ellie.
Sorry, this is bullshit. Look at God of War. You play as Kratos and Atreus who have very different playstyles, and this is entirely justified in universe. There are any number of ways that you could have made Abby distinct from Ellie in the game. Maybe she is better with guns, like actual guns, not thunder guns. Maybe she is sneakier, maybe she doesn't fight at all, but is so charismatic and intelligent that she can use others to get what she wants. The fact is, you didn't need to turn her into Abby Thunderguns, but you did. Then we catch up with Estrogen Joel. Joel seems to have a reputation as a bit of a psycho, which doesn't really work with what we get from Petty P, who seems like a totally normal, friendly guy. This is again partly a problem with casting, but also direction. Pedro Pascal is great in the right role, but he is too much of a nice guy to accurately translate Joel from the game. For 90% of the time, Joel in the show is a pretty normal guy who is dealing with past trauma. He is physically and emotionally weaker than he was in the game, and he is desperate not to lose Ellie. And then, the plot will require that he does something horrifically violent, and I'm like, I'm sorry, is this really the same character? Anyway, Dina and Joel have a relationship in the show, and although they had one in the game, this is only mentioned and never shown. Dina treats Joel like a father, and their relationship shows Joel what he is missing with Ellie. Estrogen Joel is also going to therapy, which is, of course, a very Joel thing to do. Now, I find this lazy as fuck, because the writers obviously wanted to explore Joel's emotional state before they cave his head in, and so how do they do that? Well, they have him visit a therapist, so that they can just write down what Joel is thinking, and then have the character verbalize this without anyone questioning it. The side effect of this narrative choice is that it means Joel is the kind of guy who would voluntarily go to therapy, and yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't buy that even Estrogen Joel from the show would ever willingly sit in front of someone and talk about his feelings. Anyway, he speaks with Mrs. Therapy, whose backstory is that she and her family evacuated when the outbreak happened, and they only realized afterwards that they had left their son Kevin home alone. She now struggles to deal with the guilt of getting Macaulay Culkin eaten by mushroom zombies, and so she got a job working for the scriptwriters at HBO as a blunt narrative device. Because Mrs. Therapy is a terrible therapist, she says, "Hey Joel, stop being a big smelly dum-dum. Ellie is just acting like every 19-year-old. This is perfectly normal behavior. Don't worry about her." 19-year-olds are certainly strange creatures, but Ellie's behavior is not normal. She is behaving like a 14-year-old, not a 19-year-old. 19-year-olds have, generally, grown up a little bit, and the archetypal stroppy teenager who hates their parents phase is not something that generally persists until you are 19 years old. But, of course, Ellie is not just a stroppy teenager, despite this being Joel's perspective. Mrs. Therapy tells Joel that she suspects that he is lying to her. He is leaving something out of his story. Joel has, of course, not told Mrs. Therapy that he killed a load of people to rescue Ellie from certain death, and that Ellie resents him for this because he took away her choice and prevented her from being the key to maybe saving the world. Those of you familiar with the game may well notice that this doesn't appear to make any fucking sense, because by this point in the game, Ellie learned what Joel did over 2 years earlier. So Joel would obviously know exactly why Ellie is pissed off with him. Episode 6, however, changes exactly how and when this revelation plays out, so I will cover that later in this video. Then we get a topical immigration debate, which is the first of many examples of the show gaslighting the audience by refusing to allow characters to explain themselves. Joel is responsible for overseeing logistics surrounding the construction of buildings in Jackson. He tells Maria that they don't have the manpower to repair the school and library until summer, instead of completing by spring as originally planned. Maria says, well, you need to build faster. And Joel then gives a sarcastic response, and Maria continues that they are running out of space to put people. Joel responds that maybe Maria should stop letting so many people in, and then the problem would resolve itself. Maria replies, are we supposed to just leave them out there? And Joel says,
if our lifeboat is swamped, yeah, we leave them out there.
In 2025, this is a debate. At what point is a country full? At what point do you start turning people away? In The Last of Us, whilst this is presented as a debate, this would not be a debate. This would not be up for discussion. Jackson is an established settlement that has limited resources. They are self-sustaining, but they are a small town, and they are struggling for resources because, of course they fucking are. They live in a post-apocalyptic America. Maria then makes an emotional argument and says, oh, come on, they're people too. And then she concludes,
you were a refugee too.
Fuck you!
And Joel is simply not allowed to respond because the scene is over, which means I guess Joel didn't have a response. Maria is correct, don't you know? Joel being a refugee once upon a time simply does not hold any water, and I find it unbelievable that a character like Maria, who sits on the council, could possibly hold this view, given the setting she inhabits. Joel has provided immense value to Jackson, and he is also Tommy's brother, which means you knew when you brought him in that he was not some psychopath. You simply do not know this to be true of any random person who comes knocking. Additionally, Joel arrived 5 years ago when Jackson was not struggling to house people. This means times have obviously changed, resources are not infinite, and I don't know why this would need to be explained to a character like Maria. But it doesn't matter because Joel is wrong, Maria is right, anyway, moving on. Ellie now lives in Joel's garage. Dina shows up like, hey Ellie, Joel is really cool, isn't he just the best? Let's go watch a movie with him. Ellie ignores this and then they leave to go on patrol. Ellie and Dina arrive 5 minutes late. They don't listen to Jesse when he explains what to do, believing that they know better than him and that he is being overly cautious.
You know you're only like 4 years older than us, right?
Do it! Kill her!
Ellie doesn't have a chip on her shoulder, she has a fucking canyon. She expects everyone to just bend to her will, and then they do. So Jesse instructs them to listen to Kat, their patrol leader, and that this is a recon patrol, not a hunting party. If they encounter more than 1 or 2 infected, they are to return to Jackson. Oh boy, I wonder if Ellie and Dina will listen. They set off and encounter signs of infected before Ellie and Dina ignore their patrol leader and ride ahead. Their behavior, and Kat's reaction, suggests that this is something they have done multiple times before. They are known for not following the rules and for doing their own thing. And yet, not only are they still given responsibilities such as this, but we are also told that other people in the community look up to them, and I can't tell you why.
Let's go.
We should go back and report it. Wait, guys, come on, guys.
Oh, what a pickle.
These two selfish, irresponsible clowns would never be allowed to behave in this way because of the obvious safety risk both to themselves and the entire commune. Anyway, they encounter multiple infected corpses and decide to go into the nearby building to clear it out. Because these two are not interested in behaving like adults, they instead want to hunt down infected because they find it fun. And this would be fine if the show acknowledged that this behavior was completely unacceptable. Because the idea that a pair of overconfident 19-year-olds would just be like, fuck the rules, I want to shoot something, is totally believable. The problem is that they just get a slap on the wrists every now and then, where Tommy, Joel, Kat, or Jesse are like, hey, please, don't do that. You please follow the rule. Why don't you do what you are taught? Gosh golly darn, you are so annoying. The show does not ever acknowledge the degree to which Ellie and Dina's behavior is selfish, indulgent, reckless, and puts everyone around them in danger for absolutely no fucking reason. The script is blatantly protecting its characters, and the writers are insisting one thing when the show is presenting us with another. Ellie now gets great pleasure from acting violently, because it gives her a sense of independence and power that she did not have in Season 1. She gets a kick out of fighting and blowing the heads off infected, which, sure, that would probably be quite fun, but the show then goes way too far and presents her as an oblivious simpleton. If you recall, clickers were a very serious threat in Season 1. They are also a very effective enemy in the game because although they are blind, they are very sensitive to sound, and if they catch you, they will kill you. Season 1 does a good job of translating the game's clicker encounters into the show by focusing on the extreme caution displayed by Joel and Tess. How Joel is very careful when reloading his revolver due to the risk of the clickers hearing him, as well as showing that the clickers are more durable than a regular zombie. But that was Season 1. In Season 2, Ellie and Dina kill the clickers without any trouble, and then Ellie falls into a plot hole.
Oh no.
She discovers a new type of infected, the Stalker. Stalkers are really spooky and scary because instead of attacking you in an effort to spread the infection, they sneak around and hide from you a bit because they are enemies in a zombie show, and then eventually they attack you in an effort to spread the infection.
It makes sense. Don't be a bitch.
Ellie then gets bitten by the Stalker before she kills it. Upon returning to Jackson, Ellie explains to the council that she found a big ugly smart bug. It took cover, planned, waited, and lured her in, aided in no small part by the floor collapsing specifically underneath where she was standing, thus allowing her to confront the Stalker and get bitten, instead of Dina, who is, of course, not immune. Tommy asks why they were in the building to begin with, and instead of explaining herself, Ellie says, "Oh, yeah, well, if it was you and Joel, then you would have gone in too." Tommy, having now been given a lobotomy, says, "Yeah, well, that isn't the same." And then fucking Maria is like, "Wait, how is it not the same, Tommy?"
What the fuck?
The show is once again trying to pass moral judgment on characters for stating the blindingly fucking obvious. And because Lobotomy's thinky parts don't work too good, he doesn't respond to either Maria or Ellie. He is just like, "Oh yeah, I guess it is the same." There is no difference between two highly trained, fully grown men, one of whom is ex-military, entering and clearing a building because they want to gather resources and or check for survivors, and two vapid 19-year-old idiots repeatedly ignoring their superiors and deciding that they need more thrills in their lives, so let's go and stab some zombies in the face. The show simply will not allow Lobotomy to articulate his position, which gives the impression that Lobotomy doesn't have a position. Maria and Ellie are right, either their behavior is okay for everyone, or it is not okay for everyone, and there is no difference between an adult man with military training and a 19-year-old girl out to prove herself. Later that evening at the New Year's Eve party, Dina invites Ellie to dance, and everything is very romantic because Dina is smelly and drunk. Dina is totally wasted, and she kisses Ellie, which means Ellie sexually assaulted Dina because Dina can't consent. "How could you do this, Ellie? I was just starting to like you." Then the bigotman interrupts, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing? We will be having no gay in here. We don't serve your kind." And then he calls them a word that may or may not get this video demonetized. I honestly have no idea, so I'm not going to risk it. And then Joel asserts his masculine dominance all over the bigotman by pushing him to the floor and telling him to leave. This feels like the show is overcompensating, and it is insecure about the character of Joel. In the game, Joel pushes the bigotman, but he does not need to pile drive him into the floor to make his point. Everyone knows who Joel is and what Joel is capable of, and so all the bigotman needs is a nudge, and he gets the point, and he leaves. In the show, Joel slams the guy into the floor as if to say, "I am tough, I am scary, please take me seriously." Ellie is not happy with Joel's actions, and she tells him that she doesn't need his help.
Seth had a moment in the game that was important. And in our world, which stopped at 2003 in terms of its social progress and development, there was simply not the acceptance of gay people or lesbian people or anybody on that flag. And Seth comes from that world, clearly, but it was important to not pretend that the people in this world would necessarily be in a 2024 mindset about, say, queer people.
This is a very confusing admission from Craig Mazin because the bigotman is the only person in the show who is openly homophobic, and when they later arrive in Seattle, there are pride flags and rainbows everywhere, which would suggest that the people who currently live in Seattle in The Last of Us are 2020s era progressives, otherwise this iconography would have either been removed or simply not been painted in the first place. The world of The Last of Us, in fact, seems very accepting and very conscious of contemporary social issues, which is not really a problem in Jackson, as Jackson is a functional society, a communist utopia, and a magical happy land where everyone gets along with one single exception. But as soon as Ellie and Dina leave the comfort of Jackson and venture into the unknown, they arrive in Seattle and are surrounded by pride flags. And although Ellie and Dina do not know what this iconography represents, the impression given to the audience is, cool, these people accept their identities, I feel safe, which is the polar fucking opposite of what was needed at that point in the story. Anyway, the Bigotman later apologizes for being mean, and he gives Ellie a meat sandwich, because he is subtly implying that he wants her to put his meat in her mouth, because this man is on a mission from the Lord. He is going to save this poor soul from the curse of the gay. And this is pretty much the summation of the Bigotman in the game, but the show gives him a rather effective moment later in episode 3, which I will get to in due course. As we open episode 2, Abby Thunderguns realizes that Jackson is not just a little camp with a couple of guards, it is a fully fledged city with power lines, walls, and patrols. This presents an obvious problem for Abby in her quest to pulverize Joel's face. Her crew discuss how on earth they are going to be able to break into Jackson, find Joel, kill him, and escape, as this all sounds impossible, and I mean, it is impossible. But luckily, the plot will get past this brick fucking wall pretty easily and efficiently by having Abby accidentally cross paths with Joel whilst outside of the city, because the writers have decided that Joel must die. Abby then leaves to do some recon, and Owen suggests that they need to convince Abby to abandon her mission so that they can return to Seattle, as breaking into Jackson is simply not going to happen. This is a minor change from the game, where Abby goes out alone after having explicitly lost the support of Owen and the others, which means she is acting alone when she bumps into Joel and Tommy. In the show, Abby's crew are shown a couple of times to not be entirely on board with her actions. She seems to be the spearhead, directing them towards righteous vengeance and furious anger, and they are all like, yeah, I guess we should probably do what she says. What this means is that in the show, it is less clear why they are all there listening to this tiny, unimposing woman when they very clearly want to go home. Anyway, Abby spies on the patrols and finds herself surrounded by frozen, infected corpses. Then this happens. Alright, so this appears to just be a freak accident, but it actually isn't. This isn't a case of the infected all woke up because we need thousands of zombies to attack Jackson. They woke up because they smelled or heard Abby, and the reason this happened was because Abby accidentally fell down a hill and landed on top of them, making this a freak accident with a couple of extra steps.
There's this great moment in the game. We really just expanded on this small moment. You're playing as Abby, and you come across frozen bodies, and it's scary. In part because you're not sure, why are all these bodies here? And we expanded on this, and they've already heard, as we hear from Jesse in the beginning of the episode, people have found infected that are now alive, hibernating or keeping warm underneath a layer of frozen infected, covered by snow.
There are thousands of infected here, and they, or to be more specific, the fungi infecting their bodies, are apparently smart enough to understand how to conserve body heat. They were all hiding in the snow underneath dead infected, which means the show wants us to accept that the fungus people gathered dead fungus people and hid underneath them to stop them freezing. To state the obvious, dead bodies do not retain heat, so I don't care how many you stack on top of you, this is not going to do jack shit to keep you alive in frozen temperatures. Theoretically, if you knitted together a whole load of corpses and made a little corpse igloo with multiple layers and no gaps, then okay, this might serve the same function as an igloo. But what we see in the show is not anything like that. This is a pile of bodies that has been arranged by mushroom people so that they can hide underneath. Anyway, in the game, there are a handful of zombies hanging around in the frozen wilderness, which I think is acceptable because there are comparably few of them, so maybe they got stuck or lost or whatever. In the show, there is a fucking tidal wave of zombies who set up an elaborate trap and played the waiting game. Why are they here? How long have they been here? Have they been deliberately waiting until someone wakes them up? Why would this number of infected be anywhere near here, given how remote and hostile the surrounding area is? None of these questions will be answered, which gives the distinct impression that the show inserted a horde of zombies because the entire season contains 4 encounters with zombies. The Clicker and Stalker in episode 1, the Horde in episode 2, the Horde in episode 4, and the Stalkers in episode 5.
What the fuck?
So Abby runs away from the horde of zombies that she accidentally found, and then she accidentally gets saved by Joel. Needless to say, the contrivances are stacking up. One change that is a direct improvement, however, is that the show has substituted Tommy with Dina. In the game, Tommy is like, "Hello people I haven't met before and don't know anything about. My name is Tomothy Miller, and this is my dear brother Joel." Which is inexcusably moronic, but was deemed necessary to facilitate Joel's death. Joel is characterized as someone who is very cautious and is experienced in being on both sides of traps. Some rando carelessly giving their name away is one thing, Joel or Tommy doing it is another. The show fixes this, because the blame can now be placed squarely on Dina, and Dina doing this inadvertently is entirely acceptable. Dina calls out to Joel before she knows that Abby is present, which means Dina has no reason to want to conceal anyone's identity from anyone else, and Dina is also a relatively inexperienced 19-year-old, and so her revealing Joel's name is entirely believable and acceptable, even if she had known that Abby was present. So, they realize that they can't go back to Jackson because it is too far away and the weather is too spicy. So Abby steps in and tells them to head to her murder basement, the hideout where her friends are. For now, this is acceptable because the show presents this as though they do not have a choice. This acceptability is short-lived, however, because a horde of infected is now attacking Jackson. And Joel sees this from a distance, which means Abby has to convince Joel to stay with her instead of immediately returning to help his people.
The lodge is just up ahead. We've got blankets, ammo. My friends can help you get back. We can fight.
It's a trap!
It is worth reiterating that Joel has no idea who Abby is, who her friends are, or why they are hiding in a lodge right next to Jackson. The show wants us to accept that Joel decides that he can do a better job of helping the people of Jackson if he is accompanied by Abby and the friends that she claims she has. But this is simply not something Joel would consider, given that his home, his family, is up in flames. Because Joel went on patrol with Dina instead of Ellie, he likely believes that Ellie is in Jackson right fucking now. But actually, no, let's ride in the other direction with a total stranger in the hope that she doesn't score a double bogey on his nose bogeys. There's a joke in there somewhere, but fuck it. Anyway, Abby's words to Joel are of course bullshit of the highest order, as she has no intention of helping him save Jackson. But the fact that Jackson is under attack right now means that Abby is willing to just allow Jackson to go up in flames in order to get her revenge.
I hate you.
She does not try to help. None of her friends bring this up, despite the fact that they can see Jackson from their hideout, which means they all decided, yeah, let's just kill Joel and leave. Abby and her friends are thereby complicit in the potential deaths of multiple people in Jackson, because they had the opportunity to help, but instead decided to spend their time clobbering Joel with sports equipment. And because the show wants us to empathize with Abby and to accept and understand her reason for getting revenge on Joel, this is never addressed. Abby, Joel, and Dina arrive at the hideout. Instead of being like, "Oh my god, there are thousands of innocent people about to die to an infected horde, we need to help them," Abby Thunderguns decides, "Yabba dabba doo, vengeance is mine," and spends the next few hours turning Joel's face into Play-Doh. Good God, woman, there might be doctors in Jackson. There might even be zebras. One way that they could have addressed this is by having Joel say, "Wait, please, we need to help Jackson. There are women and children there who can't defend themselves." And then the camera tightens in on Owen, who says, "Wait, what the fuck is happening in Jackson?" Joel replies, "A fucking horde of infected is attacking the city." Owen turns to Abby and says, "Abby Thunderguns, we can't leave thousands of innocent people to be eaten alive. You can harness your thunderous potential for good." And Abby replies, "We finish what we started. We can't help Jackson. It's already too late. There are too many zombies." This would be direct acknowledgement from Abby that she is choosing revenge over even attempting to help Jackson. Whereas what we get in the show is that this is never addressed, giving the impression that the writers want me to think one thing whilst presenting me with another. Anyway, aside from swapping Tommy for Dina, the show's handling of Joel's death is categorically inferior. In the game, Abby offers to explain who she is by asking Joel to guess after she blows a hole in his leg, and Joel is then like, fuck off, just do what you came here to do, because he doesn't care who Abby is. Is she one of the many people he wronged in the years since the outbreak? Is she a raider? Is she just looking for a good time? Does she have the wrong guy? None of this matters to Joel because he knows Abby has made up her mind and is going to kill him.
Who are you?
Guess.
Why don't you say whatever speech you got rehearsed? Get this over with.
In the show, Abby gives a long monologue explaining who she is and who her father was.
You're tough. I guess you probably have to be killing all those people. Do you know how many you killed that day? Did you count as you went, or?
Yes, bitch.
I guess maybe it just didn't matter.
Get on with it.
18 soldiers and 1 doctor. You remember that one? An unarmed doctor.
An unarmed doctor.
Women are devious.
That was my dad.
Get on with it!
The nurses said you barely even looked at him when you pulled the trigger, and then you just walked right past his body. But I looked at him. I saw him. I was 19.
I will slap you in the teeth.
I've been in a militia for 5 years now. Our commander trained us to follow a code.
I'm so frustrated right now.
We don't kill people that can't defend themselves. And right now, that's you.
Get on with it!
But I am going to kill you. Because it doesn't matter if you have a code like me, or you're a lawless piece of shit like you.
Oh my God, who gives a shit?
There are just some things everyone agrees are just fucking wrong.
A woman's mouth is not for the exiting of words, but for the entrance of a man's dick.
He was a doctor, a brilliant doctor, a man who studied mushrooms and also vaccines, a man who became one of the most qualified minds in neuroscience whilst also being a vet, a man who achieved all of this by the time he was about 20 years old, given that he appears to be maybe 40 by the time of The Last of Us 2, a man who was going to scoop out Ellie's brain and lay it on the table and say, I'm certain there is some way to use this brain to stop people turning into mushroom zombies. Wait, what am I doing? Anyway, this being revealed by Abby to Joel means that Joel has the opportunity to at least try to explain what he did. I am not suggesting that he beg for his life, but something along the lines of, your dad was about to cut my fucking daughter open, so yes, I shot him and I'd do it again. Maybe Abby wouldn't care, but the fact that Joel doesn't justify his actions here gives the impression that the show thinks Joel should not have done what he did. Joel just accepts what Abby says and is like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have shot that guy. And the reason this is what the show presents is because this is what the showrunners think.
Joel gives the slightest nod because he is acknowledging that what he did was capital W wrong, but also we understand he didn't care. And he still doesn't care. It doesn't matter. So yes, does he deserve to die by the rules of the universe? Sure.
This is also another example of characters being prevented from explaining themselves because the story needs to head in a certain direction. So Joel correctly points out that he saved Abby's life, and Abby responds, "What life?" and shotguns him in the leg before torturing him by beating him to death very slowly. Abby wants Joel to suffer as much as possible before he dies, and Abby does this because Abby is a psychopath.
There is a pain there that you can't help but connect with. And that's why this story is so fascinating to me. It is screwing with the fundamental physics of narrative. It is forcing your brain to get out of its comfort zone with narrative because you are struggling in that moment. I am rooting for her and I'm rooting for him.
Meanwhile, Ellie and Jesse are out on patrol, and Jesse receives a radio communication from Jackson informing him that Joel and Dina have not responded and are presumably in trouble. Because plot, they decide to split up to find Joel and Dina, and because coin toss, Ellie then ends up at the hideout before Jesse, as this hideout was presumably part of the patrol route that she was searching for Joel on. In the game, there is a group of zombies that chase Joel, Tommy, and Abby, and then they despawn because Ellie needed to get into the building so that the plot could happen. As the show redirects these zombies towards Jackson, this is no longer a problem, although this zombie horde creates pretty major problems in other areas. Anyway, Ellie walks in, sees Joel, is restrained by Abby's crew, and she screams at Joel to get up. Now, the show doesn't yet make this clear, but Dina is currently lying on the floor in the room right next to them. Abby's crew previously injected Dina with a sedative to knock her out for an hour so that they could do their thing to Joel without her having to witness it, but they did not sedate her and then take her elsewhere. She is in fact right here in the same room. This means, as far as Ellie could possibly be aware, these people have just killed Dina and are doing the same to Joel. But because the emotional focus of the scene is on Ellie and Joel, the presence of Dina is simply ignored when we would expect Ellie to notice this. After Ellie arrives, Abby decides to stop beating Joel and delivers the killing blow. Now, the show believes that Abby was on a justified mission to specifically kill Joel, and that she will not harm other people unless they force her hand. This is why they sedate Dina instead of killing her, and this is why they leave Ellie alive despite the potential risk of her facilitating the plot of The Last of Us Season 2. The problem is that Abby has already displayed a total disregard for the lives of innocents because she prioritized beating Joel to a pulp over doing anything to help the people of Jackson. If Abby is this callous, I find it very hard to accept that she would ever allow Ellie to live when she has a very good reason not to, but this is again a case of the writers desperately trying to make Abby Thunderguns as sympathetic as possible, without realizing that having her ignore the horde of zombies so that she can blap Joel makes Abby Thunderguns a The only part of this that is better in the show is that Ellie is not knocked out immediately, and so she is able to crawl to Joel's corpse and embrace him for the last time, which means the tragedy and the emotional impact this has on Ellie is more drawn out instead of being cut short. Whilst all of this is going on, there is a big epic zombie attack where thousands of zombies break into Jackson before everything is mopped up perfectly and all consequences are avoided. This is first hinted at in the final shot of episode 1, which shows us that, oh no, there's fungus in the pipe. And because season 1 turned the zombies into a hive mind for some reason, this is used as an excuse for a big action set piece that did not exist in the game. Which means the showrunners decided that they wanted a big Game of Thrones style action scene, and so they planted a zombie summoning plot device into the middle of Jackson. So the workers are clearing the pipe, and one of them disturbs some fungus, which oh so unfortunately draws the infected horde directly to them. This sequence very much feels arbitrarily inserted in the name of big budget action, but its inclusion damages other areas of the plot as described previously. The actual logistics of the battle sequence, however, are pretty good for the most part. Jackson has a system that kind of works, and their defenses are both believable and competent. Get those who cannot fight into the basement, put gunners on the roofs, clear the streets, use fire and explosives to hit the zombies outside of the walls. The problem is that HBO still had a single bloater costume left over from season 1, which means a single bloater shows up and, oh no, well, I guess we're fucked.
The plan almost works until a bloater shows up, which is sort of the way life is, right? Everything's going fine until a bloater shows up.
The people of Jackson had extensive countermeasures to deal with thousands of infected, but apparently they had no plan to deal with a single bloater, even though they die to fire, and even though there is only one of them, because when this thing shows up, everyone's like, oh no, they're gonna break through, everyone fall back. And then it pokes a hole in the wall very easily, which means if there was more than one bloater in this horde of thousands, then I guess Jackson and every other character in the show would be completely fucked. Speaking of fucked, Lobotomy has a little 1v1 with the bloater, and he wins not because he outsmarts it and not because someone rescues him. He defeats his opponent because he unloads his flamethrower into it, runs out of fuel, and the bloater is still like, blah. Lobotomy accepts his fate, and then the bloater collapses right at the last moment.
Pretty pathetic, huh?
One part of the show's depiction of the infected that had potential is the idea that the infected are getting smarter, which is simply not a thing in the game. When the stalkers are introduced, everyone is like, oh no, this isn't good, the zombies are becoming clever, whilst stalkers have always been a thing in the game. The zombies also get onto the roof during the battle, which shows an amount of intelligence, plus them apparently being smart enough to hide underneath their own dead, and we later get the introduction of spores. Principally, the idea of showing the zombies getting smarter is a good one, because it elevates the tension and it means the protagonists can't just be like, fuck it, it's just some clickers, we've killed those like a billion times already. But that said, the manner by which the show portrays this intelligence is at times very silly. So, with this action sequence having been invented for the show, and with Ellie leaving Jackson in the very next episode, this means there are going to be virtually no consequences to this immense battle. All infected are killed and disposed of efficiently and without incident, which means this big spectacle action scene could be removed from the narrative entirely without affecting the plot. All it takes is for one single person to have been bitten and you have a serious problem. And yes, we do see people getting executed after being checked for bites, but again, all it takes is for one person to be missed and you have another potential outbreak scenario. But don't worry, thousands of infected just busted their way into the tightly quarantined Jackson, and it's all good anyway, moving on. Episode 3 opens 3 months later, which is a fantastic way to obliterate the narrative thrust of the story. In the game, Ellie sees Joel get beaten to death and then pretty much immediately sets off to hunt Abby. In the show, Ellie is in hospital for 3 months and Lobotomy has not taken any action because, unlike in the game, he has no information to work with. This is because Dina is the only character who knows anything, and she has concealed this information from both Lobotomy and Ellie. This means that we have had our inciting incident for the plot of Season 2, and then everything just goes back to normal for a bit before the adventure actually begins. Count Dracula has suggested that this is how he always wanted to handle this part of the story, but he was unable to because something video games.
In the game, Joel dies, and then we have a very short period of time because we have to get back to an action because we made an action game.
What, are you retarded?
The reason they kept the story moving swiftly in the game following Joel's death was not because it makes complete narrative sense to maintain momentum and keep the plot tightly focused on Ellie's desire for revenge. The reason was because of the perceived constraints of the medium and genre. You must get back to action, stealth, and puzzles because it has been decreed by the laws of the universe. Regardless of the Druckster's retarded reasoning, the game handles this far better, because the very next scene following Joel's death is a discussion between Ellie and Tommy about what to do, maintaining a clear sense of urgency and purpose, and although an amount of time has passed because Joel has now been buried, the story as it is presented to the player does not take any time away from Ellie's desire for revenge. So Ellie is in the hospital because she got kicked in episode 2. After a chat with Mrs. Therapy, because this character exists to draw information out of the show's protagonists, Ellie returns to Joel's house and we get an emotionally effective scene of her hugging Joel's clothing in his wardrobe before she closes up again when Dina arrives. Then Dina reveals that she knows the names of the people who killed Joel as well as where they came from. Ellie is angry, believing that Dina has cost them time, but Dina reasonably defends this, saying that by waiting they may have allowed Abby to return to Seattle, thereby making it easier for them to find her, plus the fact that Ellie needed time to recover. The reason Dina has this information is because the retardisms have been transferred from Tommy and Abby in the game to just Abby in the show. Because in episode 2, Abby said to Joel and Dina,
"I'm Abby, this is Nora, Manny, Owen, and Mel,"
before leaving Dina very much alive and able to communicate this information to whomever she wants. In the game, the only name provided to Tommy before he is knocked unconscious is Mel, although the connection to Seattle is the same in both versions, as Abby in her infinite wisdom decided that she and her crew should all wear clothes that say where they came from. In the game, Tommy knows that he needs to go to Seattle and that he is looking for a woman with biceps as thick as his legs who is part of the Washington Liberation Front, which means he has a clear lead. Because the game wants Ellie to sequentially go through each member of Abby's crew before arriving at the final boss that is Abby Thunderguns herself, the game needed to find a way to communicate their names and identities to Ellie as well as Tommy, and I'm honestly not sure which version is worse. The show has Abby say, "Hello, Dina, here are all of our names. Now I'm gonna leave you alive. Please don't hunt us down one by one." The game has Ellie find a piece of paper that says, "Hello, this is everyone's names. We have signed them just in case you forgot. Please don't hunt us down one by one."
Why would you do that?
I guess the game is probably better because someone keeping a box of photos with everyone's names on for Ellie to randomly find means that someone did this for some unknown reason, whilst the show actively has Abby behave like a fucking moron despite being highly competent in basically every other way. Anyway, they talk to Lobotomy, and although part of the conversation takes place off-screen, it is implied that they revealed all of this information to him. Lobotomy is unwilling to do anything yet, because the town is still healing, and he is not willing to drop everything and go out on a revenge mission. Because Lobotomy does not have any personal agency, he says that if they are going to put together a team and hunt down Abby, he needs to ask his wife for permission. So to summarize this section of the story and compare both versions. In the show, after Ellie has spent 3 months in the hospital, Dina tells Ellie that she knows where Abby is, and then they plan to go after her with a handful of other people to get revenge. The council shoots this down because they can't afford to be further weakened following the zombie attack, so Ellie and Dina go off on their own, after which Lobotomy and Jesse follow them to rescue them. In the game, Tommy leaves on his own very shortly after Joel's death, and Maria then gives Ellie and Dina her approval to go out and bring Tommy back alive. As Ellie ventures into Seattle, she finds a trail of bodies left by Tommy as she tracks him down, and because of how things are swapped around, this entirely changes our perception of Tommy. The game paints Tommy as far more proactive and equally consumed by vengeance as Ellie. He is an agent in his own right, and he is doing what he feels needs to be done. He is very violent and reckless, but also highly driven and highly skilled. He likely doesn't care if he dies in the process. All he cares about is making Abby bleed. The show instead paints Tommy as a doormat who does what his wife tells him, and the only reason he leaves Jackson at all is because Ellie goes off on her own, which forces his hand. The next scene is the town meeting where everyone decides what to do. We open with a silly idiot farmer man who is trying to feed the people of Jackson and sort out which food sources are the most efficient. And he is interrupted by the council who are like, "Shut the fuck up, nobody cares about food, stop being boring."
It's an open meeting, the bylaws say that...
Maybe we should stick to what everyone else came here to discuss.
He sits down and the council moves right along to the next person without taking any action or acknowledging anything this man had to say, because I guess it wouldn't be a communist utopia without the people responsible for the populace neglecting to feed them. Anyway, a couple of citizens give their opinions regarding Abby, which is broadly that if they send 16 of their best across the country, then who will be left to protect Jackson if they are attacked again? Revenge is wrong, we should be good instead of bad, etc., etc. But then, the bigotman makes his triumphant return, interrupting and saying that the people who killed Joel do not deserve mercy. Somebody shoots your brother and you want to take the locks off your doors. Grow up. They will come back because we didn't make them pay, and when they come back, they will be laughing, and you will deserve it, you bunch of goddamn victims. The show not only has someone in Jackson back up Ellie and demand retribution, but it specifically has the bigotman do this, which adds an extra layer of catharsis because this guy was a prick. He doesn't like Ellie, and Joel assaulted him a few months ago, but that doesn't override his principles. And if he were 30 years younger, he may well have gone with Ellie and Dina himself. This is an interesting use of this character, because rather than just having him be the bigoted Christian asshole who dislikes Ellie and Dina because they are gay, the bigotman actually comes to Ellie's defense. And this is not a repeat of the sandwich scene, where it was pretty clear that he was not being genuine, and he had been encouraged to make amends by Maria. Here he argues passionately about how some outsiders came into their home and killed one of their own, suggesting that if they do not respond, this will happen again. This is a totally coherent and understandable argument, and it is very effective for this to be coming from a man who does not like Ellie or Joel. Ellie then reads her prepared speech, arguing that she wants justice, not revenge. She says what holds them together as a community is that they are not strangers and that they will protect each other. Despite her best efforts, the council votes against the proposal to send out 16 people to execute Abby, and Ellie is not happy. Ellie prepares to leave on her own without the approval of the council, and then Dina shows up like, "Hello Ellie, I know exactly what you were doing, and I have a map and a whole list of things that we need to bring with us and a plan for us to hunt down Abby." This is because Dina had an off-screen chat with the bigotman, who has decided to help them in spite of his bigotness, and he gives them a horse and a rifle and covers their escape from Jackson. The show does a decent enough job of justifying why Dina would do this. as her relationship with Joel is far more fleshed out than it is in the game. What I really do not like, however, is that the writers are making Dina some super genius whilst turning Ellie into a single-celled brainlet. Ellie's plan was legitimately grab gun, go to Seattle, kill Abby, and wait for this whole thing to blow over. She doesn't have time to worry about boring shit like maps and shoes and food and water and medical supplies and weatherproof clothing and tents and cooking utensils and sleeping bags and matches, and you get the fucking point. In order to be anything approximating a sensible person, Ellie needs Dina. And so, Ellie and Dina embark on their quest to avenge Joel. But very few of their scenes throughout the season relate to this. For the most part, the narrative now is primarily concerned with exploring Ellie and Dina's romance, and the show plays out largely as though these are two giddy 19-year-olds off on an adventure whilst falling in love. Although Abby is mentioned by Ellie a handful of times, this is clearly not the focus of the story when it obviously should be. Ellie and Dina make camp and discuss that one time when they kissed, and this is a scene lifted directly from the game.
Can I ask you a question?
I don't know, can you?
Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being like absolute trash, and 10 being life-altering. How would you rate our kiss from last night?
This is the start of a painful journey for all the wrong reasons, because this is the beginning of a romance that I have not been given a reason to care about, and yet the show is going to put a lot of time into trying to make me give a shit. I had my problems with Season 1, Episode 7, but the relationship between Ellie and Riley felt so much more earned and was far more engaging than anything from Ellie and Dina in Season 2, and it accomplished this in a fraction of the time. Anyway, this scene in the game takes place prior to Joel's death, and so it functions as a means by which to lull the player into a false sense of security. Ellie and Dina are being cringe and goofing around, and then holy twat nuggets, Joel has a hole in his skull. In the show, this scene takes place after Joel's death, and so simply lifting Ellie and Dina's dialogue and mannerisms from the game and plonking them here feels entirely out of place, because they should not be happy. They should not be having fun. They should be shell-shocked by what has happened, and they should be fucking miserable. Maybe throw in a scene of Dina trying to cheer Ellie up and failing. Or maybe Ellie appreciates Dina's effort and she smiles for the first time since losing Joel. But there is a clear sense of sadness because they both know that this fleeting, almost pretend happiness will not last and is not genuine. That might have been an interesting scene that developed the characters in a coherent manner, but instead we get, hey, so how good was my kiss? I want to know what a real-life gay thinks of my kissing proficiency. Which brings us to episode 4. Dina is smart enough to know that they should infiltrate at night, as Abby is likely prepared given that there is a big sign on the roof saying WLF, plus the fact that whoever is inside the building will see them coming. But Dina is also dumb enough to start playing the fucking drums in a music shop when they are trying to conceal their presence. Not to mention the fact that clickers are drawn to sound. Ellie then goes upstairs and we spend nearly 5 minutes watching her tuning the guitar and playing a song for Dina. This is meant to be an important moment for Ellie and Dina's relationship in building up to Ellie putting her fingers inside Dina, whereas in the game, Ellie has already done that, and so Dina is not falling for Ellie as Ellie plays this song. I do honestly feel that even if the show has decided to focus on Ellie and Dina rather than Ellie and revenge, this sequence could have and should have been removed, because it is painfully long and it does not justify itself sufficiently. The tone for all of this is fucked. This is set up as a story of a young girl's life being torn apart, and she is forced down a painful spiral of revenge and hatred, and yet episodes 4 and 5 in particular are far more concerned with being a love story between two teenagers.
Oh boy, a music shop. I'm gonna play the drums. Oh boy, a guitar. La 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 la.
6.5 hours later.
La 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 la. Wow, that was amazing, Ellie. Where did you learn to play like that? Well, Joel taught me. Oh yeah, that guy. Wait, why are we here again?
For the most part, Ellie in the show behaves like a fucking idiot whose brain is half mushroom. She has zero survival skills or common sense. She trades her boots for a larger holster so she can carry a bigger gun, has no plan of any kind to get to Seattle and kill Abby, repeatedly wanders around in the open without checking her surroundings, and accidentally and sometimes deliberately makes a lot of noise when she really shouldn't. Both Ellie and the other characters make multiple references to her being of below average intelligence.
Okay, yeah, because I'm stupid. Why? Because I'm stupid? That's not the word I would use. Non-school oriented.
Impressive triangulation, by the way.
That was old Dina.
Trust me, I didn't think it was you.
Dina is certainly more characterized in the show than in the game, in that she is far more of a character with a clear personality. In the game, Dina has the presence and charisma of a damp sponge, to the point where I honestly forgot she was there half the time, which is the polar fucking opposite of Ellie in the first game, whom the player is very keenly aware of. Ellie generally contrasts with Dina, who is very intelligent, at least by comparison. Dina has a magical ability where she can count how many infected are in a building just by listening to them. She knows all about camping, hiking, orienteering, horse riding, and honestly any skill that may be required to travel undetected across America and assassinate someone in a presumed heavily militarized city. But this never feels natural, because I don't fucking know how Dina knows any of this, and even if she does, there are multiple times when she also behaves like a bumbling moron, which suggests that the writers gave her knowledge occasionally, but didn't care to justify it. Intercut with Ellie and Dina's casual stroll around a post-apocalyptic Seattle, we get bits and pieces of the WLF and the Seraphites who are engaged in a war. Why is not a question I can answer, even having now watched the entire season. I can only conclude that they don't like each other very much. War is hell, the usual. The Seraphites are pseudo-religious fanatics, but that's about all I can tell you. Why do they reject technology?
I have no fucking idea.
Why do they use hammers?
I have no fucking idea.
Why do they disembowel people?
I have no fucking idea.
Why do they have scars?
I have no fucking idea.
Who is the she that they worship?
I have no fucking idea.
When you encounter the Seraphites in the first half of the game, they are very mysterious because we don't have any context for who they are. When we encounter the room full of disemboweled corpses, this is shocking, and then shortly afterwards we encounter the Seraphites for the first time. In the show, we already know who disemboweled these people, and so the shock, horror, and mystery of this sequence is far less effective than in the game. The Seraphites are introduced to us as sympathetic. Oh, look, this guy is having a chat with his kid about how much he cares about her, how they are fleeing from a war, and how they both worship a prophet who died 10 years ago. Oh no, they died. And oh dear, this other man is being tortured. Oh, the misery. And then only after both of these sequences do we see the mutilated bodies when Ellie and Dina arrive. This is an interesting parallel to how both versions treat Abby. The game has Abby and the Seraphites shrouded in mystery. They are introduced as shockingly violent, before much later in the story being like, good and evil is a point of view. Her dad liked zebras, don't you know? The show instead introduces both Abby and the Seraphites as sympathetic from the start. Then they do violent things, but the audience has already accepted them as victims to at least some degree. The desire to generate sympathy for Abby makes sense given the writer's clear objective, but it makes zero sense to do the same for the Seraphites. So I think that this handling in the show improves Abby, although the character is still a fucking mess, whilst it damages the introduction of the Seraphites, because Abby's violent act is a very personal one that is integral to the plot of both games, and so the audience needs to understand and accept this, whilst the Seraphites' violent act is just random violence against the WLF that we are not supposed to care about. Or, wait a minute, they have names in the game, so I guess maybe we are supposed to care about them? That's how sympathy works, right? Anyway, Ellie and Dina break into the WLF building, and on the way in, Dina asks what they will do if they encounter any members of the WLF who were not in Jackson. And they both agree that any and all members of the WLF that get in their way are going to die. They encounter a room full of disemboweled corpses. They hide and are pursued by soldiers in a sequence that very much feels like a video game stealth action sequence, probably because it is virtually identical to a video game stealth action sequence. Ellie overpowers an armed soldier twice her size by harnessing the incredible power of being a jiu-jitsu prodigy before stabbing him in the neck. Importantly, this is the first person Ellie has killed that was not 100% justified. Ellie and Dina then escape because the WLF soldiers all have stormtrooper aim. They find themselves underground and cornered before a horde of infected shows up and kills everyone except Dina and Ellie. This sequence is again lifted from the game, and I found it to be one of the most enjoyable parts of the game. The show's iteration is technically well executed, and it works well enough as an intense chase sequence. So they escape from the horde of infected, and this culminates in Ellie protecting Dina from being bitten by sticking her arm in the infected's mouth, as she is immune and cannot become infected. This is a change from the game, and this is something the game does far better because it is so much simpler with fewer variables. Ellie and Dina are exploring an area filled with spores that are not a thing in the TV show yet, and so Dina has to wear a gas mask to avoid becoming infected, and Ellie wears one to hide her immunity from Dina. Ellie's mask is damaged and the seal is broken.
Ellie, your mask! Here, we can share mine. No! Don't take it! Stop! Ellie, stop! Ellie, stop! What? No! Ellie, no! Stop! I'm not infected. I'm immune. I'm not coughing, do you see?
Ellie's mask becoming damaged in this way is a very easy thing to have happen, and so this feels perfectly natural. Plus, Dina's response in trying to risk herself to save Ellie is also good storytelling, and is the first time Dina in the game actually did something that made me go, wow, wait a minute, you are occasionally a character. The show handles the reveal of Ellie's immunity in a vastly inferior manner. Ellie and Dina are running away from zombies. Ellie realizes that Dina is going to get bitten, and is then able to stick her arm in the zombie's mouth so that it bites her instead.
This is insane, you fool!
So much has to happen in a very specific way for this to play out in the way that it does. There is a horde of zombies, but only one is a direct threat. Ellie realizes what is about to happen and has enough time to react. Ellie is close enough to the zombie to be able to do what she does, and the zombie just gives her a little nibble instead of tearing her arm off. There are so many ways this could have gone wrong, which is not the case in the game because Dina is not in direct danger. The reason the writers made this change is because they wanted to include the next scene, in which Dina is like, oh shit, you got bit, and she prepares to shoot Ellie, but Ellie says, no, I'm immune, let me go to sleep and everything will be okay. I won't turn into a zombie, you'll see. That scene in isolation is pretty effective as Ellie pleads for her life, whilst Dina struggles to accept that now she has to blow Ellie's head off, something that they have joked about previously. And so if the logistics that led to that confrontation didn't feel quite so contrived, then I probably would have praised that change. So Ellie wakes up like, see, I told you I'm immune, we're all good. Dina then says, oh cool, also I'm pregnant.
What?
Dina previously found some pregnancy tests in a pharmacy, and these were magical super advanced pregnancy tests that don't expire, even after 25 years, and she was able to confirm that she is indeed pregnant. Ellie then claims ownership of this child, despite the fact that she obviously had nothing to do with its conception. I actually don't know this for certain, but I am going to guess that it is not normal for a bisexual woman to discover that she is pregnant and then for her current female partner to decide that the baby is theirs and that the actual father is not a part of this dynamic. And the way Ellie inserts herself into this family dynamic is by saying,
I'm gonna be a dad.
Right, okay, can women take Viagra? What the fuck? Can women be dads? While dad traditionally refers to a male parent, the term can be used in a broader way to describe anyone who is a father figure regardless of gender. A woman can be a father to her child, especially in cases of lesbian or transgender parents, or when a woman steps into the father role within a blended family. Biological father. The term father can refer to the biological father of the child who is typically male. Well, no, it's not that it can refer to that, it's that that's what father means. A father figure can be any male or female who takes on the role of the father. How can a female be a father? We have a word for that. It's called a mother. In modern society, there's growing recognition that gender is not the sole determinant of parenting abilities, that both men and women can be loving and capable. Well, sure, yeah, but that's because mums and dads can both be loving and capable. That's fine. Language and culture. The word dad is primarily used to refer to a male parent in English-speaking cultures. However, the use of this term is becoming more inclusive and It's the definition. It is inherently exclusive. The word dad is exclusive of women because that's what the word mother means. That the two terms are mutually exclusive. You can't cross them and you can't be both. I think this Google AI thing is broken. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Also, what the fuck does Ellie mean by "we're having a baby"? She didn't do anything. She exists outside of this family dynamic. And whilst she might be invited in after the fact, as this is something that can happen when a relationship breaks down, Ellie just immediately assumes that this baby is hers and Dina's, and that Jesse is an afterthought.
We're having a baby. I mean, we and also, I guess, Jesse. So we're all having a baby. There was no father.
Now that Ellie knows that Dina is pregnant, one would think that this might affect her decision-making and her priorities, but does it fuck? Ellie is about to become a dad. She now has responsibilities, and she needs to keep Dina safe because Dina is carrying her child that spawned into Dina's womb from out of nowhere. This is something that the game handles far better than the show, because in the game, Ellie is obsessed with murder-fucking Abby in the Thunderballs. She doesn't care about her own safety, and when Dina reveals that she is pregnant, Ellie is like, "This is the last thing I need, don't I have enough to deal with already?"
I think I'm pregnant.
Don't worry, it's not yours. What are we supposed to do now?
Nothing. I just need to rest for a second.
Are you fucking kidding? How long have you known?
I was late a few weeks ago.
A few weeks? We could have still turned back.
I didn't know. I wasn't sure, okay? I didn't want to be a burden.
Well, you're a burden now, aren't you?
Dina being pregnant is a problem for Ellie. In the show, Ellie is like, "Fuck yeah, I get to fulfill my lifelong dream of being a papa," and she does not consider how this revelation affects her current mission to kill Abby. We get two very brief conversations where this is acknowledged. Ellie says things are different now, and she asks Dina to stay put before Dina refuses, and later she says that she is stupid for bringing Dina with her, but this is little more than lip service to the idea, rather than an honest exploration of how Dina's pregnancy should dramatically change their view on what they are doing. Because in the show, killing Abby is just this thing that might happen at some point if they get around to it, there is no narrative drive and no focus on this objective, which makes it far less believable that Ellie would decide to stay in Seattle with Dina to avenge Joel. We are to believe that Ellie cares more about killing Abby than about protecting the baby that she has decided belongs to her, and this is far more believable in the game than in the show. Dina and Ellie's relationship feels both underbaked and overcooked. Dina says that she was imagining a future with Ellie and their baby, and that she thought she had lost this future when Ellie was bitten. This means Dina was having serious thoughts about settling down with Ellie and raising a baby together without any interference from that pesky sperm-donating machine Jesse, despite the fact that she has been with Ellie for a week at most. In the game, there is no 3-month time jump between Joel's death and Ellie leaving Jackson, but in the show, during this 3-month time jump, Dina hooked up with Jesse again following their initial breakup, and it is during this time that he knocked her up.
You can go back to Jesse. I already did.
This means that, in the show, Dina and Ellie are very much a new thing as of a few days ago, and they are both head over heels for each other. What this could have been, and I think should have been, is a thoroughly dysfunctional relationship where they each seek comfort whilst in an oppressively bleak situation. They both want to be together, but they can't actually enjoy each other's company because of what they are doing and why. The show simply doesn't take the idea of Ellie being consumed by vengeance at all seriously. Ellie and Dina take their time, have fun, crack jokes, play romantic songs for each other, and finger bang bang into the night. And whilst Dina refuses to do this, Ellie does at one point suggest dropping her revenge mission so that she can take Dina home, which would be the responsible thing to do, but the whole point that is reinforced in episode 7 is that Ellie is driven to kill Abby against her better judgment. She is irrational and she is bloodthirsty, but actually no, let's just put a pin in that whole avenging Joel thing and go home to raise our baby.
You goddamn moron.
The changes made in Season 1 explaining how Ellie is immune also brings us to an interesting point. Ellie basically has the same backstory as Blade. Her mother was bitten as she was giving birth, which means some of the infection got into Ellie as she was still attached via the umbilical cord. Aside from taking the mystery out of Ellie's origins by clarifying that she is not just a freak of nature, this would also mean that Marlene, and therefore the Fireflies, knew how to make an immune person. Given that the Fireflies were willing to scoop a child's brain out of their skull in an effort to make a vaccine against a fungus, they would absolutely be willing to line up some pregnant mothers and have them get bitten as they gave birth. The only way around this would be to suggest that Marlene just kind of didn't tell anyone for some unknown reason, which, given the stakes and the supposed importance of Ellie's mutation, is flatly unbelievable. What is less certain, however, is what would happen if Ellie were to give birth herself. Would the mutation pass down to her child in the same way? Would Ellie consider this to be her opportunity to get a second chance at saving the world after Joel was so inconsiderate in preventing her from doing this the first time? In episode 6, Ellie tells Joel that she was supposed to die and that her life would have mattered had Joel not taken this decision from her. But the idea that Ellie could just make another immune person with a little help from Jesse the sperm donor is never addressed. These are all questions that a more nuanced show might use for some good old-fashioned character drama, but none of this is ever addressed. And so Ellie is instead going to claim ownership of someone else's baby, and it's all good moving on. Episode 5 opens with Ellie nearly playing us another song, but thankfully she stops herself. Meanwhile, Dina uses her superpowers to triangulize the schematics of the coordinates of the WLF's patrol routes, and she concludes that there is a large building where they can cut through and slip by. Dina doesn't know what this building is, but she does know that no one is patrolling there, because she has triangulized the patrol routes, you see. And they conclude that this is likely because there are infected in that building.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Shit like this is why Dina is not a believable character. She is impossibly smart when the writers are able to write dialogue that says Dina is smart, but then she is an idiot when the writers have her conclude that the WLF is consciously not patrolling a particular location because they believe it is full of zombies, which is actually a pretty good reason to patrol it if you think about it for just one fucking moment. Dina then explains a bit of her backstory, and she tells Ellie about the first person she killed. She lived with her mum and sister, she went off adventuring on her own when she was 8, and when she got back, a raider had killed her family, so she shot him. This story is used to justify Dina's actions in joining Ellie in getting revenge for Joel, and in her sticking around now that she knows that she is pregnant. She says that if that raider had escaped, she would have hunted him to the ends of the earth. This is fine for explaining why she would want to help Ellie, but again, the presence of the baby and the fact that she is now directly responsible for another life makes this idea very shaky and far less convincing. Dina essentially says, I know what it's like to lose a loved one, so I'll help you get your revenge. And the writers use this to get past the whole pregnancy thing without having either character directly acknowledge it, which feels very cheap, as if the audience is expected to simply forget about it. Dina tells Ellie that if she wants to go back to Jackson, they can, but that if they stay and if Dina dies, it will be her own fault, not Ellie's. Ellie then concludes that they are going to stay and kill Abby. Unlike in the game, Dina is the character pushing the story forwards, which often makes Ellie feel like dead weight, a side character in her own narrative. Dina invites Ellie to the dance. Dina tells Ellie who Abby is and where to find her. Dina comes up with the plan to go to Seattle and locate Abby. Dina arranges a deal with the Bigotman to get the supplies they need. Dina decides when and where to set up camp. Dina finds the WLF radio tower. Dina saves Ellie when she is caught by a soldier. Dina uses the map and radio to work out the patrol routes. And Dina learns where Nora is and works out how to get to her. This is a very strange narrative choice because this is obviously not Dina's story. This is Ellie's story. And so Dina often feels like a pointless addition to the show in that she is a distraction from the story being told, despite being the one primarily pushing it forwards. She rarely disagrees with Ellie. They are in fact almost the same person with the same perspectives, objectives, and reasoning behind their objectives. the primary difference being their levels of intelligence. This was absolutely not the case with Ellie and Joel in Season 1, as they were two fundamentally different people in innumerable ways, which is what led to great character drama. In the hands of a talented writer, placing two carefully and clearly defined characters together and exploring what they think and why can be a storytelling goldmine. Silco and Jace's scene in Arcane being one fantastic example of this. In The Last of Us Season 2, Ellie and Dina are so similar that every discussion is some variation of,
"Hey, should we go over there?" "Yeah, okay. Let's be stealthy so they don't hear us." "Yeah, okay. Oh man, this sure is scary." "Yeah, it is. I hope we don't get caught." "Yeah, me too."
There is a great contrast between Ellie and Joel. There is no contrast between Ellie and Dina. So they sneak into the hospital where Nora is because Dina overheard it on the radio that they stole. The justification for this incredibly good luck is that the WLF are battling the Seraphites, and the Seraphites are technophobes who do not use radios, and so the WLF are just able to very confidently broadcast their locations and movements, safe in the knowledge that the Seraphites will not be listening in. This obviously does not account for a Seraphite being near a radio and overhearing important information, and given the fact that the Seraphites have killed many WLF soldiers, they simply must have encountered radios multiple times. Anyway, more importantly, this nonsensical justification does not change the fact that Dina overhearing this is incredibly lucky, because essentially they are looking for Abby's crew, and the reason they locate one of them is because the enemies of the WLF just so happen to not like using radios, which means the information they need is broadcast openly by the WLF.
The more believable it feels, the more you care about the stakes and the characters.
Anyway, they enter the hospital and encounter multiple spooky, scary stalkers, and long story short, they are outnumbered and are moments from being torn apart. But then who could possibly show up but Jesse, who has come all the way from Jackson to rescue them? Jesse and Lobotomy set out after realizing that Ellie and Dina had gone against the orders of the Council. And as if I even need to fucking say this, what just happened is a Rings of Power level contrivance. Had Jesse been delayed by a minute on his journey of nearly 1,000 miles across the United States, had he taken 30 seconds longer to have a piss, Ellie and Dina would be very dead, making this obscenely lucky. Scenes like this are cheap and manipulative because if Jesse busted open the door of the theater where they were hiding and was like, "Hello, I'm here to save you, let's go," then this would be far more believable because Jesse would not have arrived at a moment of heightened tension and threat that has very obviously been designed by the writers to play with the audience's emotions. By having Jesse show up from out of fucking nowhere, seconds from Ellie and Dina being torn to pieces, this makes the audience go, "Oh, okay, I'm watching a TV show where everyone gets saved at the last minute at the most emotionally effective moment," which then undermines the rest of the drama in the show because we are now aware that these particular writers are more than willing to pull this kind of cheap trick. In the back of our minds, we know that there is always the option for a character to arrive and save the day, no matter how dire the situation. Anyway, Jesse says that he found them because he found the map they left in the theater, which tells us both that Jesse was able to track them to the theater, and that Dina left a map showing where they were going. Because Dina is Schrodinger's idiot. She is both intelligent and unintelligent, depending on what the writers want to happen. So they run away from the WLF into a nearby forest, and they encounter the Seraphites doing some bullshit before something happens. In the game, Dina is removed from the plot because of morning sickness. She physically cannot keep going out and helping Ellie hunt Abby. Ellie recognizes this, and because she cares about Dina, she says, "It's okay, stay here, I'll go out alone today." Later on, she suggests that Jesse take Dina back to Jackson so as to get her and her baby to safety, and Dina being pregnant could be understood implicitly as the reason why Tommy and Ellie choose to abandon their revenge quest and go home. In the show, Dina doesn't really have any physical limitations, nor does she have any desire to hang back, let alone go home, so as to protect her unborn child. Which means the writers needed to find a new way to remove her from the plot. Dina takes an arrow to the knee, which then incapacitates her and prevents her from being able to help Ellie hunt Abby, even though she wants to. The writers, in effect, have written Dina so that she does not view her pregnancy as a vulnerability, And so they made her get injured in a freak accident so as to justify everyone returning to Jackson. After Dina gets shot, Ellie causes a distraction so that Jesse can get Dina out, saying that they will all meet back at the theater. This works. Ellie manages to lose the Seraphites and Jesse and Dina escape. But then, Ellie changes her mind. She does not return to the theater as planned. Ellie chooses to abandon Jesse, who has risked his life trying to find her, and Dina, who is pregnant with her child. And she sneaks back into the hospital because, honestly, fuck Jesse and Dina, revenge is a dish best served boiled. In the game, Ellie breaks into the hospital by fighting her way through the front door. They obviously can't do this in the show because revenge bad, so, oh look, a hole, and now Ellie is inside.
Man, this time these crackers have gone too far!
This fucking hole leads into the hospital that, as we are about to learn, is so critically important to the WLF that they have decided not to abandon it despite the fact that if you wander downstairs, you will turn into a mushroom person.
Alright.
Nora the Explorer is wandering around the hospital, and because we saw Ellie sneak into the hospital, this of course means she was able to locate Nora whilst remaining undetected, and she didn't have to kill anyone on the way in because fuck you, don't think about it. Ellie is like, hello, where's Abby Thunderguns? And Nora is like, well, Joel was a bitch who deserved it, before running away. Now I need to take a slight detour. Spores are now a thing in The Last of Us. Spores existed in the games, but they were omitted from Season 1 because the showrunners didn't want to put their expensive actors in masks for extended periods.
So there's a scene coming later that's, from the game that we needed Nora to know immediately that Ellie is that girl. And that was the impetus to start the conversation. Like, well, we really do need spores. How do we do them?
Spores are presented in Season 2 as a new development, as the WLF are only now discovering that they exist. We see that spores are released from the bodies of the infected and that they are a means of transmitting the infection through the air. This poses a very serious threat, and so, naturally, a bunch of soldiers masked up and went into the basement with flamethrowers to get rid of all the mushroom goop and stop the spore spreaders, except that, no! They just close the fucking door and tell people not to go down there. Yes, I am serious. They write off the lower levels and simply close the doors, evidently not understanding that doors are not airtight. It is suggested through dialogue that the lower levels were sealed, but when Nora opens the elevator to escape from Ellie, the soldiers are like, oh fuck, the shaft is open, get back, as this poses a very obvious risk. But the problem here is that Nora didn't really do anything to open the elevator shaft that leads directly to certain and highly contagious death. The elevator door was already slightly ajar. It was not in any fucking sense of the word sealed. Also, these fucking spanners kept using the fucking hospital because, oh, it's really valuable and we can't afford to lose it, when there is air downstairs that will kill you. The hospital is not valuable. It's a square made of bricks. Just take whatever hospital equipment you so desperately need and stick it in another building. You can migrate a hospital to somewhere else. I know that this building probably says hospital on it, but that doesn't mean that this building has to be the hospital. Anyway, because Nora is retarded, she flees from Ellie into the forbidden downstairs of the hospital where they left a giant nest of infected spewing goop into the air. She knowingly runs into the basement to hide from Ellie, even though Nora knows that doing so will lead to her growing various interesting new fungally appendages. She is stuck between Ellie and the spores. Ellie is a person who wants to interrogate her, whilst the spores are a biological phenomenon that will absolutely 100% kill her. And Nora chooses the spores. In the game, Nora runs away from Ellie and finds the hole leading into Sporeville, and so she obviously stops and turns to Ellie like, no, stop, you don't understand, because Ellie does not yet realize that there are spores down there. Ellie holds Nora hostage, and upon being surrounded by soldiers, she actively throws herself and Nora into the spores, condemning Nora to a horrible death then and there. In the show, Nora runs away and seems to forget that the spores will kill her, which means she quite literally ran into certain death. What we get next is another scene that is copied virtually one for one from the game. The problem here is that the show's versions of Joel and Ellie are not the same as the game's versions. They are similar, but they are very notably different. The show's version of Joel is far more vulnerable, both emotionally and physically. He is partially deaf, he has dodgy knees, and he goes to therapy to talk about his feelings. Similarly, where Ellie in The Last of Us 2 most of the time is a laser-focused vengeance machine whose very existence is dedicated entirely to turning Abby inside out, Ellie in Season 2 is a happy little jokester who goes on an adventure with her girlfriend and who might potentially get revenge on Abby if the opportunity presents itself. This is partly why Ellie flipping a switch and beating Nora to death feels very out of place for her character. The other part is that I simply cannot take Bella Ramsey seriously as an intimidating and violent character. The one part of this that is an improvement over the game, however, is that this is the first time Ellie has had to do something like this, beating information out of someone. And so her being traumatized after the fact is something that works, at least partially, because she did also have to deal with David and she had to kill Riley after she became infected. But point being, with Nora, Ellie was the aggressor, and Ellie was the one crossing the line. In Season 1, Ellie shoots a man to save Joel, and this man is then executed by Joel. She kills Riley off-screen through unknown means because Riley had been bitten. She stabs Troy Baker in the neck because he was going to cut her up and eat her, and she stabs David repeatedly because he was going to do the same and worse. In Season 2, Ellie shoots 14 zombies, stabs one, and also stabs this man in the neck because he was a member of the WLF who got in the way of her mission to kill Abby. This means that, discounting zombies, because I don't think it is fair to expect killing zombies to cause anything like the level of trauma that killing a person might, and also discounting any killings that could be considered self-defense, by the time Ellie finds Nora, she has killed one human. And whilst this could loosely be described as self-defense given the circumstances, Ellie went into that building intending to kill anyone who got in her way, and this guy got in her way. I am not able to count up how many zombies and people she killed in the first game because I have not played it in a very long time, but by the time I arrived at Nora in The Last of Us 2, I had stabbed 43 zombies, shot 35, blown one up with a landmine and set one on fire. I had stabbed 40 humans, shot 46, blown 3 up with a landmine, set one on fire, and fed one to a zombie. Hello. Eat him! Eat him! I made him for you! No, eat him! He's right here, eat him! Yes! I had stabbed 3 dogs, shot 4, blown one up with a landmine, and set one on fire. This gives us a total of 180 kills by the time Ellie has reached Nora, 80 of which were zombies. In The Last of Us 2, it is fucking comical for Ellie to be any more or less traumatized by what she did to Nora than to anyone else, because Ellie has killed 91 people in the last week or so.
But random, of course Ellie kills more people in the video game. It's a third-person action-adventure game with horror elements.
Shut the fuck up, retarded alter ego. If Neil Cuckbags wanted to tell a story about how bad revenge is and about how killing is a cycle, then maybe he shouldn't have made a video game where the primary mechanics are stealth takedowns and cover shooting that do not give the option for non-lethal interactions. The game did not need to undermine the message they were very clearly going for because, to state the fucking obvious, the game developers were in control of the game they were making. It could have been a roguelike deck builder. It could have been a 4X strategy game. Trying to shoehorn that story into this kind of game was a dumb fucking idea because the genre undermines the story being told. Either you need to change the genre to facilitate the thematic through line, or you need to change the thematic through line to fit the genre. But anyway, as we close episode 5, Ellie interrogates Nora, who reveals that Abby's dad was the doctor who was going to turn Ellie into a vaccine, and that Joel killed him to save her. Ellie replies that she already knows this, and that she doesn't care, before torturing Nora for information. And although the camera cuts away for dramatic effect, Ellie is able to get 2 words from Nora before killing her. Whale and wheel. We open episode 6 with a flashback showing Joel's childhood and his relationship with his father. I don't have a huge amount to say about this because this scene is a single-purpose tool that doesn't really work. Essentially, Tommy was buying drugs and got screwed over, and Joel stepped in and beat up the kid selling the drugs. The implication is that Joel's dad is going to beat Tommy for buying drugs, And Joel says, "You are not going to hurt him." And so Joel's dad pulls up a chair and says, "You know, back when I was a wee lad, I stole a candy bar, so my old man broke my jaw." He explains that although he has hit both Joel and Tommy, he has never hit them the way he was beaten when he was younger. He is doing better than his father did, and when it is Joel's turn, he hopes that Joel will do a little better than him. This scene exists to set up the idea of doing a better job of parenting than the prior generation, and this idea will reappear later in the episode. But this comes across as though Joel's dad is like, "Hey, I know I hit you and Tommy, and I know it's bad, and I know I shouldn't do it, but man, some part of me, when I see my son, just makes me want to backhand him into next week. I just have this compulsion to hit children, you know, Joel? And when I'm beating you, just know that I'm not beating you quite as hard as my old man beat me. Because I really am trying, Joel. I really wish I didn't have to hit you, but I just kinda do, sorry." Then we get a sequence of flashbacks, and the purpose of these is to slowly build up Ellie's resentment of Joel during the 5-year time jump in between seasons. There is a major change to how exactly this plays out, but for now I will quickly summarize the flashbacks. The first is quite brief and takes place 2 months after the end of season 1. Joel buys a cake from the Bigotman for Ellie's 15th birthday, and restores an old guitar as a present for her. This establishes a baseline for their relationship. They clearly both love each other, and there is no hint as to the problems that will emerge later. The second flashback is taken directly from the game. Joel takes Ellie to a museum for her 16th birthday. Ellie tells Joel that she is eager to start going out on patrols, whilst Joel insists that she will go on patrols when she is ready. This section in the museum is almost identical in both versions, and as a result it is one of the best scenes in the show and the game. This continues the relationship established in the prior flashback, and so it makes the prior flashback feel mostly redundant. These flashbacks could have been combined into one, rather than having two that accomplish the same thing. Anyway, as they leave the museum, Ellie notices some fireflies, and this is the tiniest suggestion that something is wrong, and that she has questions for Joel regarding the end of season 1. Things progress very quickly in the next flashback, which takes place on Ellie's 17th birthday. Joel has again got her a cake, but he walks in on her doing drug-assisted tattoo lesbianism. They have an argument, and Ellie decides to move out of the house and into the garage. Joel tells Ellie, "You may not like the rules, but this is my house," and Ellie responds that actually this is not Joel's house, because this house was given by the people of Jackson to both Joel and Ellie. And because Jackson is a communist utopia,
You don't own anything.
Joel, again, does not respond to this idiotic technicality by saying, "No, Ellie, they gave me this house because I am a fucking adult and you were 14 when you arrived here. You live here because you are my daughter, and if you want to ask the communists if they can build you a new house when you were 18, then be my guest. But for now, you are my daughter, not an equal shareholder in a house that no one actually owns." Instead of saying anything like this, Joel instead agrees to fix up the garage so that Ellie can live there instead, so that she can do tattoo lesbian drugs in peace. The flashback concludes with a glimpse of some artwork, presumably drawn by Ellie, including the words, "You have a greater purpose." The next flashback takes place 2 years later, on Ellie's 19th birthday, approximately 9 months prior to the start of the season. Ellie has decided to harness the power of her inner movie reviewer, and she rehearses some nitpicks that she has for Joel regarding what actually happened in Salt Lake City. She never actually asks Joel these questions, which means the show never has him give any answers, so allow me. If the Fireflies spotted us a mile from the hospital, how did they get surprised by an entire group of raiders? Because the Fireflies are evil and retarded. If the raiders could kill all those people and Marlene, and you had to carry me the whole time, how did we escape? Because the Fireflies are evil and retarded. If there are dozens of immune people, why hasn't anyone heard of any? Because dozens of immune people out of the remaining population of the United States is a fractionally small number, and owing to the nature of immunity, you may well have met some other immune people yourself and not known because they hide it just like you do. Also, the Fireflies are evil and retarded, so they probably killed them all. Anyway, Joel's present for Ellie this year is to take her out on her first patrol. Ellie is disappointed that she is on the safe trail where no one has ever killed a zombie before, because somewhere between the ages of 17 and 19, Ellie began to thirst for violence, and so she is unhappy that she won't be able to shoot any mushroom people. They get a call that another patrol is in trouble, and so Joel tells Ellie to go back to Jackson. This is quite similar in setup to one of the flashbacks we get in the game, where Joel takes Ellie to get some new guitar strings, and they have the following conversation regarding Ellie's readiness to go on patrols. As an amusing side note, I streamed this part of the game before episode 6 had aired.
Jesse tells me you're handling your own quite well on the group patrols. He's even recommending you for paired patrols. Though I think you're still a bit young for it.
I'm a better shot than almost all of them. And I have more experience than most of the new recruits
Look,
who've...
you think you're ready. I trust you.
Okay. Thanks.
You just do me a favor and start with the shorter routes for now. You know, see how you handle them.
All right.
This is so much better than the show. What the fuck? If this was show Ellie, she'd be like, fuck you, Joel, I'm an adult. Whereas this Ellie, like, understands what Joel is saying. And I was absolutely correct in my prediction, as Ellie does indeed respond to Joel telling her to go home by saying, fuck you, I'm an adult. Or, more specifically,
I'm not your fucking kid, Joel. I'm your partner.
and Joel is like, oh yeah, I guess you are, and then they ride off to the rescue. This next section is a significant deviation from the game. Eugene is a character who is mentioned in the game. He was an ex-Firefly who died of a stroke when he was 73, prior to the events of the game. In the show, the writers have repurposed Eugene as the catalyst that causes Ellie to lose faith in Joel. So they find Eugene, who has been bitten, and the summation of this sequence is that Eugene wants them to bring him back to Jackson before he turns so that he can say goodbye to his wife. Joel is like, no, we can't risk that for obvious reasons. Ellie is like, Joel, let the man say goodbye to his wife, and so Joel makes a decision. He tells Ellie to go and get the horses, and he promises that he will not kill Eugene while she is gone. He then walks Eugene to a nearby cliffside with a beautiful view so that he can die as peacefully as possible, and then Joel executes Eugene. This is a very emotionally effective scene that is elevated by some fantastic acting, which brings to mind episode 3 of season 1. And much like that episode, this one includes the best scenes of the season, but can almost entirely be skipped without affecting the central narrative. Anyway, Ellie returns with the horses and Joel apologizes for doing what needed to be done. When they return to Jackson, Joel consoles Eugene's wife, Mrs. Therapy, by telling her that he wanted to tell Mrs. Therapy that he loves her, that he wished he could say goodbye to her in person but didn't want to put her in danger, that he was not scared, he was brave, and that he took his own life. Joel is lying, but he wants to comfort Mrs. Therapy and ensure that her last memories of her husband are as positive as possible. Joel lying to Mrs. Therapy is a kindness, and there is nothing to be gained at all by telling her what actually happened. Then Ellie tells Mrs. Therapy what actually happened, traumatizing this poor woman purely because Ellie is pissed off with Joel and wants to make her point.
He begged to see you. He had time. Joel promised to take him to you. He promised us both. Joel shot him in the head.
This character is detestable. She is too immature to understand what Joel is doing or why. Or, to be more specific, Ellie thinks she knows why Joel is lying, but she is unable to get over the fact that Joel is lying, and how Joel being a liar affects her. And Mrs. Therapy is caught in the crossfire, suffering unnecessarily as a direct result of Ellie being a If Ellie truly objects to what Joel does here, then she should have sorted this out in private, not in front of a grieving widow. This would then give Joel the opportunity to respond, but then again, this is The Last of Us Season 2, where characters explaining their actions is rarer than Neil Mandruk saying something insightful. Anyway, the whole point of all of this is to slowly build a sense of distrust, culminating in Joel making a promise and breaking it, causing Ellie to doubt everything about him. This builds and reaches a breaking point at the New Year's Eve party from episode 1, which takes place 9 months later, where Ellie confronts Joel about what happened. The following conversation is an adaptation of 2 very separate conversations from the game that are separated by over 2 years. In the game, Ellie finds out what Joel did when she is 17, and she then forgives him when she is 19 on the day of the New Year's Eve party. In the show, Ellie finds out what Joel did when she is 19 on the day of the New Year's Eve party, and then forgives him during the same conversation.
In the game, something very, very different that happens. Ellie travels. She leaves Jackson and she finds the hospital. And in it, she finds evidence of what Joel has done, and then she confronts him about it. We felt like, for live action, the show has become more grounded, more realistic than the game. It felt a bit far-fetched for her to leave, and so we needed to achieve it in a different way. So that is a variable that we have to address at some point.
So let's break down what this means and how this affects their relationship. In the game, Ellie becomes suspicious of Joel about 2 years earlier than she does in the show. She returns to the hospital in Salt Lake City and discovers documents showing scans of her brain that have been left on a table, as well as a tape recorder. The tape recorder reveals that there were no other immune people, and that the doctor was the only person who could possibly have made a vaccine, and the word "was" suggests that this man is now dead. This tape recorder is a very contrived and lazy plot device that was very obviously inserted to speed up Ellie learning the truth, and it means that one of the Fireflies recorded their feelings and intentions following Joel rescuing Ellie, and then for some unknown reason, placed this tape recorder in a bag in the operating room where Ellie was going to be de-brained. Anyway, Joel shows up and Ellie demands to know the truth.
If you lie to me one more time, I'm gone. But if you tell me the truth, I'll go back to Jackson.
Joel should respond, Ellie, they were going to kill you in an attempt to make a vaccine that would prevent people from being turned into mushroom zombies, which, even if successfully distributed, would not make a lick of difference in the grand scheme of things.
Clint Eastwood's message here. Joel should say, they beat me, robbed me, threatened to kill me, they were going to kill you without your consent, and they had no guarantee of success. I mean, that's where you could start, Joel. That would be a good way to begin this conversation.
However, Joel then proceeds to paint himself in the worst possible light.
Making a vaccine would have killed you, so I stopped them.
You done fucked up now!
This is not good, because Joel is forced to speak in a very specific way so as to allow the plot to happen. But how does it compare to the show? Ellie calls Joel an asshole for lying to her about Eugene, and says that he had the same look in his eyes that he had after Salt Lake City 5 years earlier. She gives him one last chance to come clean. Were there other immune people? Joel shakes his head. Were there raiders? Joel shakes his head. Could they have made a cure? Joel nods, tears filling his eyes.
Did you?
And in both versions, Joel confirms to Ellie that he killed the Fireflies. Now, moving on to his justification. Just like in the game, Joel says that making a cure would have killed Ellie, but he then goes on to accept that he took a cure from everyone, and that he will pay the price because he believes Ellie will leave him now that she knows the truth. This is pretty nonsensical because the writers, and therefore Joel, are transparently treating Joel's decision as a binary trolley problem, a hypothetical where all variables have been accounted for. Do you allow someone to kill your daughter if doing so will save the world? And the debate over what Joel did at the end of Game 1 and Season 1 is a debate that can be had, because there are so many factors at play. Would you kill to protect your daughter? Would you kill an unarmed man to protect your daughter? Would you save your daughter and forsake any chance at creating a vaccine? Would such a vaccine even work? If it did work, how would you distribute it? If it were distributed, how would this actually affect the world? Yes, it would prevent the creation of more infected, it would have saved Riley, and it would have saved Eugene. But it would not address the total global societal collapse, nor would it address the threat posed by the infected that still exist. There is so much more to this debate than the simple question of whether or not Joel was being selfish, and because of how Game 1 and Season 1 end, this is a fantastic and thought-provoking conclusion to the story of Joel and Ellie. But Game 2 and Season 2 decide that actually no.
Joel's a bastard, man!
Joel was bad, and what he did was bad, and he deserves to die. He doomed the world, don't you know? And the nice doctor man who was about to kill a child without her understanding what was happening and without any guarantee of success, he was nice to zebras, and he too had a daughter, Abby Thunderguns. And because Abby Thunderguns is right to want to kill Joel, the writers slam both characters into each other to facilitate their narrative desires, resulting in a contrived revenge story that dramatically oversimplifies the ending of the first game, forcing the audience to accept something that is simply not true. Joel did kill people, and killing people is bad. But the whole point was that by the end of Game 1 and Season 1, Joel was killing for the best possible reason: to save the person he loved. And this is a greater problem in the show than in the game, because whilst the game has Joel acknowledge that making a vaccine would have killed Ellie, thereby implying that the vaccine would have saved the world, the show goes the extra mile by explicitly having Joel agree when Ellie says that Joel took the prospect of a world-saving vaccine from everyone. Now on to Ellie's reaction to this revelation. In the game, Ellie breaks down crying and says that she will return to Jackson as promised, but that she is done with Joel. She spends the next 2 years or so despising Joel and having minimal contact with him, before confronting him following the New Year's Eve party.
I was supposed to die in that hospital. My life would have fucking mattered. But you took that from me.
And Joel then tells Ellie that he would do the same again. Joel does not regret his actions in saving Ellie's life.
I don't think I can ever forgive you for that, but I would like to try.
In the game, Ellie has gradually been able to come to terms with what Joel did and to at least understand him. This was a lengthy healing process, and she is finally trying to reconnect with Joel because she cares about him. She wants to try to repair their relationship. In the show, Joel also says that if he had a second chance, he would do the same again because he similarly does not regret his actions. Because Ellie in the show is a cunt, she says,
"Because you're selfish."
And Joel responds that he did what he did because he loves her. Ellie doesn't understand what it is to love a daughter, but if she ever has a child of her own, Joel hopes that she will do a little better than him, bringing us full circle from the opening flashback of the episode. Ellie says that she doesn't know if she can ever forgive Joel, but she would like to try, and we cut to black. Condensing this revelation, acceptance, and forgiveness into one 5-minute discussion is significantly less effective than how this goes in the game, because Ellie has not taken any time to digest what she sees as a monumental and initially unforgivable betrayal. This dramatically lessens the sense that Ellie has a serious moral problem with Joel's actions because he admits what he did, and instead of being like, "Fuck you, I never want to speak to you again," and taking over 2 years to show any desire to reconnect, Ellie is immediately like, "Yeah, I'll forgive you."
Yay!
This also brings me to a more general question regarding the season as a whole. Why bother with the 5-year time jump if Ellie isn't going to resent Joel for years? The purpose of the time jump in the game is that the writers needed Ellie's relationship with Joel to change dramatically, but this is no longer a necessity in the show. The catalyst that causes Ellie to doubt Joel is their encounter with Eugene, and the fact that Joel comes clean and Ellie forgives him during the same fucking conversation means that there is no reason why the show needed a 5-year time jump. This could have easily been condensed into 6 to 12 months. This would have had the added benefit of there being far less of a disconnect between Bella Ramsey's appearance and portrayal of the character and the behavior of everyone else in the show. Bella Ramsey may not look anything like Ellie, but in Season 1 at least, she did win me over because she can very obviously act. In Season 2, however, she is no longer playing a 14-year-old child. Ellie is now 19, and this character now has to carry the weight of the story in a way that she did not in Season 1. Removing or condensing this 5-year time jump would mean Bella Ramsey still looks age-appropriate in the role. Yes, I know that she's 21, but she looks about 15 at most. And this would also have made her behavior in certain scenes more appropriate, given that she is still a child. Point being, when you show me Bella Ramsey doing her scary, intimidating, "I'm going to kill you" face, I am going to laugh and wonder why everyone just lets this kid do whatever she wants. And this isn't even a slight on Bella Ramsey's acting. Some actors simply do not look intimidating, and no amount of acting talent is going to be enough to convince me otherwise. Like, for example, this dude here is 2 years older than me, and yet he perpetually looks like a 13-year-old. But that brings us to the end of episode 6. I hope we are all ready for the finale. We return to the present day with Jesse and Dina, who made it back to the theater following episode 5. Dina is in a lot of pain and Jesse is trying to remove the arrow. He says that if he pulls the arrow out, he will tear an artery, so he needs to push the arrow through her leg. Jesse, that might just be the most retarded thing you have ever said. But don't worry, Dina, Jesse knows all about arteries, so it's okay.
I know where the arteries are.
Okay, well, that explains basically nothing.
A nice detail here is that Jesse offers Dina whiskey to help with the pain, and she adamantly refuses because she's, of course, pregnant. Jesse picks up on this, as Dina is not known to turn down alcohol, and he then questions Ellie about this later. So, Jesse removes the arrow, and Dina is okay because Jesse grew up surrounded by arteries. Then Ellie arrives, and this part is just fucking weird. She bangs on the door and shouts, "Jesse, Dina, it's me." Jesse, however, is not convinced that this girl who sounds exactly like Ellie and knows both of their names is indeed Ellie, so he asks her what the name of her horse is, so as to confirm her identity, which she does. As a brief aside, Ellie's horse Shimmer has been entirely forgotten by the plot since episode 4. I actually hadn't realized that they abandoned Shimmer in the music shop until they brought up Shimmer's name in this scene, which makes the show's insistence that Ellie really cares about Shimmer rather amusing. Anyway, Ellie asks Dina if the baby is okay, because Ellie, being an idiot, thinks that when you take an arrow to the knee, your womb will contract and flush the baby out as a defense mechanism. She then reveals what happened at the end of episode 5. She tells Dina that she found Nora, interrogated her, that she found this surprisingly easy to do, and that she left Nora alive, beaten to a pulp, to turn into a zombie, which is even more sadistic than what Abby did to Joel. Because at least Abby put Joel out of his misery. Ellie instead walked into that room and did possibly the most evil thing she could have done. Anyway, she continues that before she came to Jackson, there was a Firefly base in Salt Lake City with a hospital, and they were going to use her to make a cure. This would have involved her death, and Joel found out about this, so he killed everyone in the hospital, including the doctor, who was Abby's father, and he did this to save Ellie. The only part of this that Ellie did not already know prior to meeting Nora is that the doctor was Abby's father, and that this is why Abby killed Joel. But Neil Suckyman rather confusingly does not seem to be aware of this.
This whole time that she's been going after this theoretically motivationless villain, not only did she know why Abby showed up to kill Joel, but she knew before Abby showed up to kill Joel what Joel had done. She knew it and did not tell Dina.
Excuse me, Dr. Uckman, Ellie did not know why Abby killed Joel until Nora told her.
That was Abby's father.
The revelation that Joel killed Abby's father was not known to Ellie prior to the end of episode 5, and so I have no idea what Druxtifer is talking about here. Also, this being dialogue delivered to Dina essentially means that we don't need any of episode 6. It can be surgically removed from season 2 without any plot information being lost. We, as the audience, already know everything Ellie just said. The most important part of episode 6 is Ellie committing to at least trying to forgive Joel, but in the game, we don't get that scene until the very end of the story, which means had the writers saved that scene for later, the entirety of episode 6 could have been removed from the show. And whilst there are good parts of episode 6, pacing and efficiency are a key component of storytelling, and so taking an hour to communicate something only to then summarize it in about 10 seconds in the following episode feels like the writers wasted our time by spamming flashbacks at us so as to fill up an episode of TV. Upon hearing this, Dina tells Ellie that they need to go home, possibly because she no longer believes killing Abby is the right thing to do, but this is not elaborated on. The following day, Ellie and Jesse head out to find Lobotomy, leaving Dina in the theater. Jesse then confronts Ellie, suspecting that Dina may be pregnant because Dina said, "I can't die," and because she refused alcohol. Ellie then confirms and congratulates Jesse on becoming a sperm donor. Jesse then says that now he can't die because he is going to be a father, and he is angry because, thanks to Ellie, both himself, Dina, and their child are stuck in a war zone. Ellie is not happy about this, but I am unsure if this is because Jesse has just shattered her dreams of being a father, or because she realizes that she has put all of them in danger. Jesse later reveals that he loves Dina, but not like Ellie does. He seems to know that Ellie and Dina have a special connection, and he knows this because he read the script. Jesse has virtually no context for Ellie and Dina's relationship. He knows that they kissed at the New Year's Eve party. He knows that they traveled to Seattle to avenge Joel. And given their behavior since he arrived, it would be reasonable for him to assume that they have continued their relationship. How this translates to "you love Dina in a way that I don't," I simply can't tell you. Then they hear radio chatter indicating that Lobotomy is in trouble, and they head to his location. The show introduces a minor logistical issue that is not present in the game. In the game, Tommy is hunting Abby, and so it is entirely reasonable to assume that Tommy will be found near the aquarium where Abby is claimed to be. In the show, Tommy is not hunting Abby. He is out looking for Ellie, and so Jesse and Ellie are instead heading towards their rendezvous point, and oh, would you just look at that? It's the aquarium that just so happens to be right next to where they were already heading. Anyway, Ellie sees a wheel and a whale and realizes that Abby is in the aquarium, and so she is given a direct choice by the plot: save Lobotomy or hunt Abby. And Ellie chooses the latter. Jesse is obviously like, "What the fuck are you talking about? We need to go and save Tommy." And Ellie says that they don't actually know that the gunshots they just heard are from Tommy.
Yes, we do.
We don't, and even if it is, he's got them pinned down.
In an effort to convince Jesse to come with her, Ellie says that if 3 more people had voted with her, then this wouldn't be a debate. Jesse would go with Ellie to kill Abby. This is the first of multiple logically broken assertions made by Ellie. The point that she wants to make is that had the vote passed, Jesse would currently be on a mission alongside Ellie to kill Abby. However, Ellie is suggesting that Jesse would prioritize killing Abby over saving Lobotomy, which is a meaningless fucking statement because no normal person would ever do that, and the vote would change absolutely nothing about the situation they are now in. Jesse then reveals that actually he voted against the proposal in episode 3 because he believes that everything Ellie does is for her and her alone, and that he did not believe her claim that she wanted justice. This was always about revenge, and this wasn't in the best interest of the community.
Fuck the community!
Ellie then decides to rip into Jesse by calling him a hypocrite, because earlier in the episode they came across some WLF soldiers attacking a Seraphite, and Jesse prevented Ellie from intervening, saying that he did not intend to die in someone else's war. Ellie has therefore concluded that Jesse is not a good person as he claims to be, because he let the Seraphite die.
Which is why he wasn't in your community?
Again, this is a meaningless proposition. Neither Ellie nor Jesse know anything about the Seraphites. They don't know who this guy was or why he was attacked. Jesse's decision not to intervene was an entirely rational one, because as he directly stated, there were 6 of them and 2 of us, plus the fact that he is going to be a dad. So yes, Ellie, you fucking brainlet. Of course Jesse chose not to suicidally run in to save someone he doesn't know, when doing so will result in his child growing up without a father. Hold on a minute, maybe Ellie wanted Jesse to run in and die so that she could reclaim fathership over his child. Anyway, Ellie continues that Jesse is no better than her because if he were in her shoes, if his family was beaten to death in front of him, he would do the same as her. And the third time is indeed the charm. Ellie has, again, said something that does not fucking compute. She is arguing against a straw man by suggesting that Jesse doesn't want Abby dead. The reason Jesse is opposed to Ellie here is because Ellie wants Abby dead and is willing to risk Lobotomy's life in the process. Lobotomy is the closest thing to family Ellie has left, and he is in direct danger. This is what Jesse has a problem with. Additionally, Ellie treats this as though she has to kill Abby right the fuck now, otherwise she might leave the aquarium, and does not consider whether Abby is even there to begin with. Additionally, fucking yesterday, Ellie was willing to drop her revenge quest and go home. And so, yet again, the writers are clearly trying to tell me that Ellie has become consumed by vengeance, but they have utterly failed in conveying this.
Rationalizers rationalize. They come up with good arguments, even though there's something else underneath them. And then, when she's called on it, turns it around on Jesse in a way that actually is quite impressive and true and meaningful, because Jesse did let a kid die.
So Jesse hears all of this and he basically explains everything I just said. He goes through in detail about how every single thing Ellie just said was horse shit. No, because this is the last of us season 2, Jesse has been reset to factory settings, and so he stands there like a fucking plank and says,
I really hope you make it.
Before leaving to rescue Lobotomy. Then Ellie goes on a completely pointless detour because I guess the writers needed to fill 5 minutes or so with some bullshit. She hops in a boat and sails over to the aquarium but is capsized by a giant wave. She washes up on the shore and is captured by some Seraphites. They string her up and prepare to poke a maggot hole in her belly, but then they hear the sound of their village being attacked by the WLF, so they run off and Ellie gets back on the boat and heads to the aquarium. Okay, not entirely sure what the point of that was, but alright. Essentially, Ellie survives getting shipwrecked, luckily washes up ashore instead of drowning, accidentally gets captured by Seraphites, and then accidentally escapes because the Seraphites forget that she is their enemy. This is a confounding blend of convenient timing mixed with incidental plot armor that feels completely pointless because it doesn't lead anywhere. There is no narrative reason for this to happen whatsoever, and Ellie could have just got on the boat and traveled to the aquarium. So, Ellie finally sneaks into the aquarium and encounters Owen and Mel. Owen tries to buy time by reminding Ellie that he kept her alive back in episode 2, which is true. Ellie then plays the whole, both of you show me on the map where Abby is and if it doesn't match you are both dead thing that Joel taught her. Owen begins to point at the map, but instead grabs a gun and... Oh no! Ellie just killed Owen! Revenge is bad, oh the misery! And not only that, but the bullet accidentally hit Mel! Oh my, revenge certainly is bad. Unintended consequences are indeed both unintended and consequential. And not only that, but Mel was pregnant! Oh dear, well isn't this a thematically relevant triple kill? Ellie accidentally causing the death of a pregnant woman and being horrified is principally a fine idea. The problem is that she was going to kill this woman the moment she walked into the room. She beat Nora to death and left her to endure the unthinkable whilst unable to move. Even if Owen and Mel just immediately were like, yeah, Abby's here, go for it, neither one of them is leaving that room alive because Ellie cannot trust them not to stop her. However, setting aside whether or not Ellie would have killed Mel, the fact is that she did not intend to kill Mel when she shot Owen. And in some ways, this is an improvement over the game, but in other ways, this is far worse. It makes more sense for Ellie to be traumatized over killing Mel entirely by accident rather than in self-defense, as is the case in the game, where Ellie did not have a choice. I don't really think that Ellie had a choice in the show either, but if we accept that Ellie would have let Mel live, then Ellie's highly emotional reaction to her death is more explicable. Conversely, the game has Ellie intentionally kill Mel, and the purpose of this is to reveal to her how far she is down her quest of murder and vengeance. She has become so desensitized to killing that it's just second nature, and it takes the revelation that Mel was pregnant for Ellie to begin to come to her senses. However, this requires multiple layers of convenience, most notably that Mel is wearing very baggy clothing, and so Ellie did not realize that she was pregnant until afterwards. By changing this to an unfortunate accident where Mel is collateral damage in Ellie's defensive killing of Owen, rather than a fully intentional but uninformed kill, this muddies the thematic waters even further because the show does not treat Ellie as a traumatized young woman who has gradually become a monster. It treats her as a traumatized young woman who doesn't really seem all that bothered about revenge and never really commits to any particularly evil act, other than in the case of Nora, in which she commits the most evil act of the entire series. In the game, Ellie clearly voluntarily progresses through Nora, Owen, and Mel, and the circumstances surrounding each killing become more and more avoidable. Nora needed to be tortured for information, so Ellie doesn't really have an alternative. Owen was killed in self-defense, so okay, Owen needs to die. Mel was also killed in self-defense, but killing her was less justifiable than the previous two, as Ellie had disarmed her and yet still chose to execute her. In the show, Ellie beats Nora to death and she acknowledges the psychological toll this took on her. Owen was then killed in self-defense under circumstances where Ellie would almost certainly have needed to kill him anyway, and finally, Mel is killed entirely by accident And so this is no longer a case of Ellie crossing the line in a way that she hasn't previously, setting aside her body count well into the hundreds by this point. This is now a case of, oh dear, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. Ellie's crime is that she put herself in a position where a pregnant woman was in danger, and through an unfortunate mishap, the woman is killed. Whereas in the game, Ellie's crime is that she knowingly murders a woman that she didn't need to kill, before realizing that she was pregnant, and so the game does a better job of conveying the idea that Ellie has become a monster as bad as, if not worse, than Abby. However, why in the fuck did a heavily pregnant woman travel across the country on a murder mission that she very obviously did not want to be a part of? I genuinely don't know the answer to this. I have no idea if the game explains this because at the time of recording I have not yet played the latter half of the game. I guess we will probably find that out in Season 3. But anyway, Ellie has just been whipped in the balls by the thematic through line. Dina is pregnant. Ellie is going to be a dad. Dina and her baby are in danger because of Ellie. Joel said that if she ever has a kid of her own, he hopes she will do better than him. And now Ellie has just shot a pregnant woman. While Mel is bleeding out as the bullet went through the side of her neck, she is able to tell Ellie that she wants her to remove her baby before she dies. Ellie has no idea how to do this, and Mel becomes delirious and so is unable to instruct her. Ellie then tearfully places her hand on Mel's belly, having just killed both her and her child. Maybe revenge isn't such a good idea after all. Ellie then remains in the aquarium next to Mel and Owen's bodies for an unspecified amount of time, which presumably means the building was empty and neither Abby nor anyone else heard the gunshot. Eventually, Lobotomy and Jesse arrive and they head back to the theater, but not before Jesse realizes that Ellie has just shot a pregnant woman. Back at the theater, Lobotomy, presumably unaware that Ellie chose to get revenge instead of rescue him, reassures Ellie that she did the right thing, and that Owen and Mel were a part of Joel's death too. They made their choices. However, no character present addresses the obvious complicating factor that Mel's unborn child made no such choice. Ellie replies,
"But Abby gets to live."
Lobotomy asks her to make peace with that, and Ellie says, "I guess I'll have to." This is a marginal improvement upon the game, because the idea of Ellie going through what she went through on her quest to kill Abby and then being like, nah, actually, let's go home, is incoherent garbage. The whole point in the game was that of a sunk cost fallacy. Ellie might have reservations every now and then, but these are fleeting because she has already crossed so many lines. Conversely, in the show, Ellie has killed 4 people, 5 if we include Mel's baby, and she has already shown a desire to go home. This isn't to say that the show handles this well, however, because Ellie seems to flip-flop in her commitment to killing Abby in every other scene, but it is at least more believable that she would accept failure and go home. Lobotomy leaves to start packing, and Ellie thanks Jesse for coming to save her again, and they conclude that Jesse is a good person.
You set the world on fire to save me.
Again, he does not address the fact that as far as he is aware, Ellie just murdered a pregnant woman. Then they hear noise from outside and they run to help, and oh no, Jesse is dead.
Oh no!
Whoops, well, I guess that's that. If only Jesse hadn't said, hello, I hope I don't die, not once but twice in this episode, then maybe this would have been shocking. I wonder if Ellie will ever acknowledge that if it wasn't for her, Jesse would still be alive. But at least now she can be a dad without any competition from Jesse, so everything worked out, I guess. It turns out that Abby Thunderguns is here. She is holding Lobotomy at gunpoint, and she just shot Jesse in the face. She presumably found Owen and Mel in the aquarium immediately after they left, and then followed them back to the theater, snuck in while everyone was in the back room, and then ambushed Lobotomy when he was alone to draw everyone out. This does line up, although it means Ellie is very lucky that Abby didn't find her before Lobotomy and Jesse did, given that Abby must have been very close by, if not inside the aquarium itself, in order to follow them back here. Ellie tells Abby that she killed Owen and Mel, but that she didn't mean to hurt them. They merely got in the way of her bullet, you see. She says that she knows why Abby killed Joel, and reveals that she is the reason Joel killed Abby's dad. The reason why Ellie reveals all of this is in an effort to save Lobotomy. And this works in principle because Ellie has apparently learned from Jesse that she needs to put others' needs before her own. She appears to be offering herself in place of lobotomy, which makes sense given everything that has happened. Abby then aims her gun at Ellie, and we hear a gunshot as we cut to black.
I let you live, and you wasted it.
I already know that Ellie does not die here, so what actually happened is something I guess we will need to wait until Season 3 for clarification on. For this to work thematically, for Ellie to have learned what the show thinks she has learned, then Ellie will need to sacrifice herself to save lobotomy, to accept some consequences for what she has done, and for Abby to let lobotomy live. I have no idea if this is what happens, as I have not yet played the end of the game, but my guess is that Abby did not shoot Ellie, and that Abby will not let lobotomy live. And so, why the Season 2 finale manufactures a cliffhanger suggesting that this is what happened, I unfortunately can't really say until I know what happens next, but we may well pick up on that when Season 3 comes knocking in a couple of years' time. That brings us to the end of The Last of Us Season 2, and what a ride it was. Basically every character is a fucking moron. The majority of the drama stems from the characters not talking to each other when they have every reason to. Joel does not attempt to justify himself to either Ellie or Abby, and the reason is that he is not allowed to. The writers have decided that what Joel did was wrong, and Joel knows it was wrong, and so he is going to quietly bear that burden until he dies. Ellie barely does anything this season. She is angry that Abby killed Joel and goes out to get revenge. She repeatedly gets rescued by other characters, kills a grand total of 4.5 people, realizes revenge bad, and then pays the price or doesn't, depending on whether I am treating the show as an isolated piece of media with no knowledge of what comes next. There are a whole bunch of scenes I didn't mention because they are breadcrumbs, presumably intended for the Abby side of the story planned for Season 3, but they are entirely inconsequential in Season 2, primarily involving Isaac and the WLF preparing some kind of military action against the Seraphites. Adapting the story structure of the game into multiple seasons of TV was always going to be a challenge because the chronology of the game does not lend itself to this new medium. One option would have been to tell Ellie and Abby's stories simultaneously by cutting between them. Another option would have been to focus harder on Ellie and to summarize Abby in an episode or two. I don't know what the best option would have been, but I can say that because they have largely stuck to the chronology from the game, this means Season 3 is going to be the Abby season. And much like in the game, I imagine the audience will check out completely if they have not already. Unlike in the game, we now have to wait for 2 to 3 years to find out what the fuck was going on with this Abby character who showed up and murdered the protagonist of the show, and the showrunners are relying heavily on the audience caring enough about Ellie to remain invested in the story going forwards, and Ellie in Season 2 of The Last of Us is a thoroughly dislikable character. Many of the problems with the game translate into the show pretty much one for one. Neil Druckmann can claim, as he has, that the intention was that in Game 1 and Season 1, the Fireflies would have made a cure and this would have saved the world, and that therefore Joel was wrong for doing what he did, but that doesn't mean that this is supported within the work itself. Thankfully, this failure of storytelling doesn't affect Game 1 or Season 1, because that story does not pass judgment on Joel for his actions. Game 2 and Season 2 absolutely pass judgment, and Part 2 of the story is in fact built upon this core concept. We have to accept something ridiculous before the story can even begin. However, there are some positives. The character of Dina is a vast improvement over the game. She has more of a personality and presence, although she again largely serves as a distraction from the central plot. Jesse is an improvement in a similar way. He is more characterized in the show, and so he is more memorable, but there are clear weaknesses that become present thanks to the more thorough characterization. The logistics surrounding Joel's death are marginally better in some ways, but worse in others. The trauma Ellie feels from killing in the way that she does, as well as the central revenge bad theme, make far more sense in the show because Ellie's body count is not in the hundreds. Abby is far more sympathetic and her motive is clear, which doesn't particularly help Season 2, but will probably help Season 3. Additionally, her physique is vastly more believable, and finally, the expansion of Seth the Bigotman into an actual character was much appreciated and quite effective. The Last of Us 2 is a story about the cost of violence, obsession, and revenge, and neither the game nor the show communicate this idea clearly or effectively. In the game, Ellie is a turbo murder machine who every now and then is like boohoo, isn't revenge bad, whilst in the show, Ellie is not primarily interested in revenge, and a key moment of violence is altered to become an accident, which means the story does not convey a character descending into a destructive spiral of violence. Where Season 1 was a mostly faithful adaptation of a good game with an excellent story, Season 2 is a bad adaptation of a bad game with a bad story. And despite the showrunners making multiple changes to this story and how it is presented, the vast majority of these changes are for the worse. I have no idea what they are going to do with Season 3, or if there will even be a Season 3, given that audience reception has tanked gradually throughout Season 2. But if Season 3 happens, then we will continue breaking down The Last of Us 2 in a couple of years' time. Thank you as always for watching. I do hope you have enjoyed the video. In the description you will find a link to my second channel where I upload various bits of extra content such as video game streams, including my blind playthrough of The Last of Us 2, which, as of recording, I am currently about halfway through. You will also find links to my community Discord server as well as my Patreon. If you have any suggestions for future videos, or if you agree or disagree with anything I covered in this one, then do let me know in the comments. But with that, the time has come for me to depart, and so I shall see you in my next video.